We have a flag in the room.
We're gonna face Court Square.
Oh, we should.
Good to go. This meeting of the Springfield City Council is called to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Maria Perez.
Present.
President Councilor Sean Curran.
Present.
President Councilor Mala Brown. Absent Councilor Catering Walls.
Present.
President Councilor Catering Walsh. Absent Councilor Davila. Councilor Deliver. Absent Councilor Earth.
Present.
Present Councilor Allen. Councilor Allen. Absent Councilor Letterman.
Present.
Present Councilor Edwards.
Present.
Present Councilor Fenton.
Present.
Absent. Present Councilor Whitfield. Councilor Whitfield. Absent Councilor Gavon. Present.
Madam Clerk, does that conclude the roll?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, which councilors are marked absent?
Councilor Catering Walsh and Councilor Allen and Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Will the council and guests please rise and join me in a moment of silence? Thank you, and guests are now invited to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm noticing there is not a flag present in this room, but there is a flag at Court Square, so we will face Court Square. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Councilor Devlin, I'm going to ask you to join me right here because we're going to have testimony from that seat. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. The following councilors are participating remotely: Councilor Michael Fenton, Councilor Justin Hurst, and Councilor Malo Brown. Councilor Tracy Whitfield has also informed me that she plans to participate remotely, although I don't believe that she has yet joined us. And so we'll recognize her at the time that she does. Since we are not in the council chamber this evening, it will not be necessary for members to stand and rise when they make remarks. Rather, if you'd like to make a remark and you're present in person, just sort of raise your hand so we can see you and I'll put you in the queue. For members that are participating virtually, you should continue to raise your hands in the queue. If you're here to speak to an item on the agenda, we will invite you to join us at the head of the table. That will allow folks that are participating virtually to be able to see you and also to hear you. Councilor, if you could just remove, I think that's your bag, from the chair there. And with that said, I would like to ask if there are any reports of committee.
Yes.
Councilor Edwards.
Earlier today, there was a joint meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee and the Finance Committee. At that meeting was attended by Councilor Perez, Councilor Whitfield, Councilor Hurst, in addition to Lindsay Hackett, Tim Sheehan, and Attorney Tom Moore and myself. The discussion was we immediately went into executive session where we stayed and did not come back for public session. And then that meeting is the discussion of item number 14 on tonight's agenda related to land taking along what is known as Falcon Way.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards.
I'm sorry. It was the recommendation of the committee as the joint committee that the report to the committee of the whole is in favor of the acquisition or the expenditure of the funds, allocation of the funds for the acquisition of the property in question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Are there any other reports of committee? Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The General Government Committee met this past Thursday, July 14th. In attendance were myself and Counselor Edwards, constituting a quorum of the committee. Also in attendance were yourself, Mr. President, Counselor Govan, and Counselor Hurst. The only item on the agenda was the discussion of President Letterman's proposed remote hybrid policy for the city council, and that policy was unanimously approved with a positive recommendation for the body tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Fenton. Are there any other reports of committee? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept the reports?
Motion to accept.
Motion has been made by Counselor Edwards, seconded by Counselor Davila. Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the reports of committee.
Counselor Counselor Curran on the report, accepting the report of committee.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Perez.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Mother Brown.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Walsh, absent Counselor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen, absent Counselor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Whitfield, absent Counselor Govan.
Yes.
The votes are sufficient. Committee reports are accepted. Without objection, and keeping with our policy relative to special permit hearings, I'd like to take the special permits and zone changes from our last meeting before we get to the rest of the business meeting. Is there any objection?
No objection.
Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call item 20.
I have here, a special permit, amend existing special ground permit, for at West Side Dickinson Street.
Is there anybody here to speak to this item? Attorney Prime?
Sorry. This is my surprise. I'm trying to think.
That's for you. Thank you, Attorney Fryman. Can you state your name and address for the record?
Sure, Ellen Fryman, Chatfield and Fenton, 1441 Main Street.
And your colleague?
Juan Latorre, on behalf of Verizon, 122 Forest Hills Road, Springfield.
Thank you. This permit is on for its second hearing. Had the first hearing at the last meeting. Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted in favor of the petition?
None that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
Madam Clerk, has any testimony been stated or submitted in opposition?
None that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
Do the petitioners wish to make any further remarks in support of the petition?
I just, at the last meeting, we didn't have the letter yet from the Civic Association, and that was submitted and distributed after the meeting, and that was supportive of our application. And everybody we talked to has indicated their support of the project. They're looking forward to good service, better service.
None from me at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you both. Is there anybody present in person wishing to speak in support of the petition? And is there anybody present virtually seeking to vote or seeking to express support for the petition? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, can you please recognize Councilor Whitfield?
Councilor Whitfield?
Present.
Seeing no
Present.
further individuals, thank you, Councilor Whitfield. You're present.
Okay.
Seeing no further individuals present to speak in favor or against, without objection, I will declare the hearing closed. Hearing no objection, the hearing is now closed. Thank you. Is there any debate amongst the council on this matter? Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, allow me, Mr. President, to say that I'm pleased to be here, and I think I'm getting used to this new settings, and so thank you all, my colleagues, and to the members of the public for adjusting as we try to move forward in these new times. That's correct, Mr. President. I did contact, the members of the Forest Park Civic Association, and they are in support of this, project, which will indeed, result in better service for residents. And so they're supportive of the item.
Thank you,
Mr. President.
Councilor Davila. Is there any further debate amongst the council? Seeing none. Without objection, Madam Clerk, I'd ask that you call the roll on item 20. Madam Clerk, as you call the roll, I would ask that you call the chair's vote last, so I do not influence the vote in any way.
Okay. Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Govan?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Walsh? Absent. Counselor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen? Absent. Counselor Fenton?
Abstain?
Counselor Walsh? I'm sorry, Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes. Votes are sufficient, and the special permit is approved. Madam Clerk, please call item 21.
Do we have to
Oh, I
identify the
apologize.
reasons?
Councilor Perez on the reasons.
Pero yo creo que como tú sabes, estoy dejándoles a ellos que ustedes tengan una pregunta.
One moment, folks. Okay, Councilor Perez on the reasons.
Reasons for granted permit. Number one, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use, structure, or condition. Number two, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. Number three, adequate and appropriate facility will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use. Number four, to incorporate the planning staff analysis into the decision as the basis of the findings.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the reasons.
On the roll, accepting the rolls, on the reasons, Counselor Perez?
Yes.
Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Brown? Counselor Walsh, absent. Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen, absent. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Whitfield? Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Gavon?
Yes.
Counselor Letterman?
Yes, votes are sufficient, and the reasons are accepted. Madam Clerk, please call item 21.
I have here a special permit for motor vehicle sales at a property known as 469-473 Taylor Street.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This hearing is on for its second and final hearing. Are the petitioners present from 469-473 Taylor Street?
They are. Matt Campaneri right here.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted in opposition to this hearing since our last meeting?
No, none that I know of, Counselor.
And Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted in support?
None that I know of, Counselor Letterman.
Does the petitioner wish to issue additional testimony in support of their petition at this time?
I don't.
And is there anybody present here in the committee room who would like to testify in favor? Is there anybody present virtually who would like to testify in favor? Seeing none, is there anybody here to testify in opposition in person? And is there anybody here to testify in opposition virtually? Seeing none, prior to closing the hearing, are there any questions from counselors? Seeing none, without objection, I'll declare the hearing is now closed. Is there any debate amongst the council on item 21? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to approve item 21.
Counselor Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Brown? Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Walsh, absent. Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen, absent. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton? Counselor Fenton?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Counselor Whitfield? Yes. Counselor Whitfield? Yes. Counselor Gavon? Yes. Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The permit is granted. Councilor Perez on the reasons.
On the reasons, number one, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use, structure, or condition. Number two, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. Number three, adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use. Number four, to incorporate the planning staff analysis into the decision at the basis of the findings.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the reasons.
On the reasons, Counselor Perez?
Yes.
Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Counselor Brown? Counselor Brown?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Counselor Walsh, absent. Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen, absent. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Gavon? Yes. Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the reasons are approved. Madam Clerk, please call item 22.
I have here a special permit
Thank
to
you.
operate a medical office, clinic and treatment facility with overnight stay at 489 Breckwood Boulevard.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are the petitioners for 455, 487 Breckwood Boulevard present?
Yes.
Can you please state your name and address for the record?
It's Carla Santiago. My address is 225 Osborne Terrace, Springfield, Mass.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted to this body since our last meeting in favor of the petition?
None that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
And Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted in opposition?
None that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
Does the petitioner wish to issue additional testimony at this time in support of their special permit? Ms. Santiago?
No.
Ms. Santiago, was that a no?
That's correct.
Thank you. Is there anybody present in the hearing today wishing to issue testimony in support of the special permit? And is there anybody present virtually wishing to issue testimony in support of the special permit? Is there anybody present to speak in opposition in person to the special permit? And is there anybody present virtually to speak in opposition? Seeing none, before we close the hearing, are there any questions from councilors? Seeing none, without objection, I'll declare the hearing is now closed. Is there any debate among the council? Seeing no debate, Madam Clerk, without objection, please call the roll to approve the special permit.
In approving the special permit, Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Councilor Brown? Yes. Councilor
Yes.
Walsh? Yes. Councilor Walsh, absent. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen, absent. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gavon?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the special permit is approved. Councilor Perez on the reasons.
On the reasons, number one, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use, structure, or condition. Number two, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. Number three, adequate and appropriate facility will be provided for the proper operation use. Number four, to incorporate the planning staff analysis into the decision as the basis of the findings.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the reasons.
On the reasons, Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Councilor Walsh, absent. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen, absent. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gavon?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the reasons are accepted. Madam Clerk, please call item 23.
I have here a special permit to operate a medical office clinic, for overnight stays for known as the property at 950 State Street.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are the petitioners from 950 State Street present?
Yes.
Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Carla Santiago, 225 Osborne Terrace, Springfield, Mass.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago. And Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted since our last hearing in opposition to this petition?
None that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
And has any testimony been submitted in favor of the petition?
None that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
Does the petitioner wish to offer additional testimony in support of the special permit at this time?
No.
Thank you. And is there anybody present to speak in favor of the permit in person? And is there anybody present to speak in favor of the permit virtually? Seeing none, are there any questions from councilors before we close the hearing? Councilor Brown.
I couldn't quite hear what actually the petitioner was requesting. Can the petition, can I hear exactly what they said? What are they trying to do? I didn't hear it.
Ms. Santiago, can you address Councilor Brown's question relative to the nature of your petition?
We are trying to request a special permit for dental office.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank
You're
you, Mr.
welcome.
President.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Are there any other questions, Councilor Davila?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is second hearing, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is final approval.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, without objection, I'll declare the hearing closed. Is there any debate? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, we'd ask you to call the roll on approving the special permit for 950 State Street.
Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh, absent Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Allen, absent Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton? Councilor Fenton? Absent Councilor Whitfield?
Are you present? I mean, yes. I'm sorry, guys.
Yes, Councilor.
I'm distracted.
Yes, Councilor Gavon?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman?
Yes. Madam Clerk, how many yes votes is that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Votes are sufficient and the special permit is approved. Councilor Perez on the reasons.
On the reasons for granted permit. Number one, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use, structure, or condition. Number two, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. Number three, adequate and appropriate facility will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use. Number four, to incorporate the planning staff analysis into the decision at the basis of the findings.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Madam Clerk, please call the roll on accepting the reasons.
On the reasons, Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh, absent Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Allen, absent Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton? Yes,
Yes.
Councilor Fenton? Yes, Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Gavon?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the reasons are approved. Madam Clerk, please call item 24.
I have a special permit to allow for motor vehicles repairs and sale at 45 Colton Street.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are the petitioners from 47 Colton Street present? say again, are the petitioners from 47 Colton Street present? I do see we got 47 Motor Services present virtually. You are muted, though.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you now. Can you
Yeah.
please state your name and address for the record?
Nombre, apellido y dirección. Edwin Mejia. My address for my house is 27 Northway Drive, Springfield, Mass. 01119.
Thank you so much.
For the
Madam
business,
Clerk. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
for the business, E47 Colton Street, Springfield, Mass. 01109. I have the translator, the guys, in the between me. It's better for me in English. Hello.
That is no problem. Ma'am, would you also like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Francis Olga, and I'll be the translator.
You'll be translating. All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Madam Clerk, since the last meeting, have we received any testimony submitted in support of the project?
None that I know of, Council Letterman.
And have we received any testimony submitted in opposition?
None that I know of, Council Letterman.
Thank you so much. Does the petitioner wish to submit additional testimony in support of their special permit at this time?
Si tú tienes un documento que quieres presentar para que vean que tu business es aprobado. No, tú no tienes nada. No. Ahora, right now, no tengo ningún problema. Yeah, no.
Thank you so much. And is there anybody present to speak in support of the permit in person? And is there anybody present to speak in support of the permit virtually? Seeing none, is there anybody present to speak in opposition to the permit in person? And is there anybody present to speak in opposition to the permit virtually? Seeing none, are there any questions from counselors before we close the hearing?
Ahorita preguntando si tienen cualquier pregunta.
Seeing no questions from counselors, without objection, I will declare that the hearing is now closed. Is there any debate from the council on this matter? Seeing no debate, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on approving the special permit.
Council Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Council, Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Council Brown?
Yes.
Yes.
Individual a ellos si lo acepto.
Council Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Council Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Council Allen, absent Council Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Council Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Council Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Council Gavon?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Council Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the special permit is approved. Councilor Perez on the reasons.
Reasons for granted permit. Number one, the specific site is an appropriate location for such a use, structure, or condition. Number two, the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. Number three, adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use. And number four, to incorporate the planning staff analysis into the decision at the basis of the findings.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Madam Clerk, please call the roll to approve the reasons.
On the reasons, Council Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Council Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Council Brown?
Yes.
Yes. Council Brown? Yes. Council Walsh, absent Council Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Council Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Council Allen, absent Council Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Council Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Council Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Council Gavon?
Yes.
Yes. Council Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The reasons are approved. Madam Clerk, please call item 25.
I have a zone change, hearing for property known as East Side Plainfield Street.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody here to speak to the zone change for East Side Plainfield Street? I I believe this is actually on for the first time. It may just be on for referral. Is anybody from the planning department present? So I'll say one more time, is there anybody present from, to speak on the zone change for East Side Plainfield Street? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to continue.
Motion to continue.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Edwards to continue item 25, seconded by Councilor Govan. Is there any debate? Madam Clerk, without objection, please call the roll on continuing item 25.
On continuing item number 25, Councilor Perez.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Curran.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh. Absent, Councilor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Allen. Absent, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Govan.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient. Item 25 is continued. Madam Clerk, please call item 26.
I have here a zone change of a portion of the property known as 914 Boston Road.
Is there anybody present to speak to this zone change at 914 Boston Road?
Yes, Councilor Paul Malik, Doherty, Wallace, Pillsbury, and Murphy, 1 Monarch Place in Springfield.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. This zone change is on for the second step. Is there anybody, Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted in support of the zone change since our last meeting?
No, none that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
And Madam Clerk, has any testimony been submitted in opposition?
None that I know of, Councilor Letterman.
Does the petitioner wish to add additional testimony in support of their special permit at this time, Attorney Malik?
Just quickly, to update you, the Springfield Conservation Commission issued an order of conditions in furtherance of the project last week. It was a favorable result. And I want to emphasize that the Pine Point Neighborhood Council has unanimously approved this zone change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Is there anybody present looking to speak in support of the zone change? And is there anybody present virtually looking to speak in support of the zone change? Seeing none, is anybody present in person to speak in opposition? Seeing none, is anybody present virtually to speak in opposition? Seeing none, are there any questions from councilors before we close the public hearing? Then without objection, I'll now declare the zone change hearing closed for 914 Boston Road. Is there any debate amongst the council? Seeing no debate, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on approving the zone change.
Yes. Councilor Perez.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Curran.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh. Absent, Councilor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Allen. Absent, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Govan.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The zone change is granted, and reasons are not needed on a zone change. We will return to regular order. Madam Clerk, please call the first item.
We have under information, May revenue versus expenditure.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Burns, if you want to join us.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, I'm presenting the May revenue versus expenditure report. As I mentioned in the Finance Committee earlier this afternoon, we are at 100% of budget on the revenue side, and the driving force behind that is the $41.2 million that we received from Eversource in April for prior year personal property tax bills. On the expenditure side, we're at $671 million, or 86% of the budget. And as a comparison, for the same period last year, we were at $621 million and 85% of the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Are there any questions on the May revenue versus expenditure report? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the report.
On the report, Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh, absent Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Hurst?
Yes.
Hurst, yes, Councilor Allen, absent Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton? Councilor Fenton?
Councilor Fenton is absent.
Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Govan?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the report is accepted. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
May Law Department expense report.
Is there anyone present to speak to the Law Department expense report?
Thank you, Mr. President. Patrick Burns, 90 Clemens Street, Springfield. Tonight, I'm presenting the May Law Department expense report, and I believe Attorney DeSouza is here to answer any specific questions on the report.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Are there any questions relative to the Law Department's expense report? Councilor Hurst? Councilor Hurst, you are muted.
Sorry. Is Attorney DeSouza present?
Yes, Counselor, I am.
Attorney, just a quick question regarding these settlements. Were there any IIU investigations that occurred? And if so, how were they resolved? Were there any outcomes in these settlements?
So I'm sorry, I didn't come prepared to speak to that tonight. And I'm at my house, so
Understood.
I could get that information about we've done 6 of the 12 that we discussed, and I would be happy to submit that in whatever form the council would like me to.
That would be great. And maybe just in advance of next month, when you report out for your next report out, or actually in September, it just would be great to have that information.
Sure.
Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. Are there any other questions? Councilor Davila?
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney DeSouza, good evening, ma'am. This pot of money, I think it's roughly doing quick math, we're talking about close to $700,000. Is this coming out of the pot of money that we approved a while back? I think it was a $5 million or $6 million to settle police brutality cases. Is this part of that money?
Yes. This is my monthly report on our spending. Well, it's actually Pat Burns' report. He does all the hard part of putting the report together. But this is the monthly report of our use of those monies.
Okay. Now refresh my memory, if you may, please. Is that $5 million or $6 million that we approved?
It was $5 million, Counselor.
$5 million. Okay. And how much of that money has been used already?
Through the end of May, we have used $1,597,868.95. And that represents 6 settlements of the 12 cases that we had discussed with you folks when we requested the funds. And so there's remaining in that appropriation $3,402,131.05.
Right. Now, my last question, Attorney DeSouza, I see here on this report that it says vendor's name, and it has a few names on it. Some of them are law firms. What is that? I'm missing that part. Is that who we settle with?
So, as you know, the $5 million goes to support litigating these cases as well as any settlements. So the first line item was for outside counsel. Doherty Wallace acted as outside counsel on the Vigno case, and that was their billing for May. The next line Hector Panera, that's the attorney for Jonathan Ramos. So all settlement checks are made payable to the attorney as attorney for, and they disperse it from there. The next vendor is Allen and Ball, and that was again counsel for the plaintiff in that case, which was Stephen Vigno versus the city. And then finally, the vendor Philbin and Associates, they provide transcription services for depositions, and that's in fact what they billed us for a deposition that was done in a case known titled Martinez versus City of Springfield, which is a police misconduct case. It was one of the cases we had discussed settling, but it is not yet settled.
I see, okay. Mr. President, may you indulge me for one more question, sir?
Go ahead, Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Souza, if you
Yes.
could say, how many more cases do we have pending?
Well, we have 6 more of the ones that we had discussed originally, the cases that we felt should be looked at with an eye toward settling if possible. Or, if we had to litigate, we're going to require some additional resources. I have one additional, I'm sorry?
What do you mean with additional resources?
Like outside counsel and expert witnesses, those kind of things. And so there's 6 of those still remaining. There is additionally a case that we're looking to do a mediated settlement on that had not, and it's early in the process. And if and when that goes forward, I will approach, council in executive session to discuss that. We have some other cases that are pending, which internally, we've made a decision that we don't want to move those towards settlement, at least with the facts as we know them to this point.
All right, thank you, Attendant Susan. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Are there any other questions on the expenditure report? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the report.
Yes. Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown? Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Wall? Absent, Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Allen. Absent, Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton? Councilor Fenton?
Councilor Fenton is absent.
Absent, Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Gavon?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The report is accepted. Madam Clerk, please call item 1. Thank you, Pat.
I have here a petition from Eversource Gas, Granderas Terrace.
Is there anybody present to speak to the petition on Grenada Terrace?
Hi, this is Matt Nichols from Eversource Gas, Springfield. Grenada Terrace is just a main replacement project along the streets Granada Terrace, Sorrento, Ventura, and Pomona, approximately 4,000 feet in total. Just replacing cast iron with new plastic.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Are there any questions from the council? Seeing none. Councilor Edwards?
Sorry.
Is item number 2 also Eversource?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Davila?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. When are you planning to do this project, sir?
Should be within the next month or 2.
Next month. Are you replacing what again?
Replacing cast iron main with new plastic main on Granada, Sorrento, Ventura, and Pomona.
Okay, and where are you replacing it?
Where in the street?
No, why? Is it just regular?
Oh, why are we replacing? It's just the cast iron main is close to 100 years old, very brittle, very aged, and this is an area of poor pressure in our system, so we're trying to move those customers over from the low pressure system to the medium pressure system, so that in the winter and things when gas demand increases, that we shouldn't see as many pressure issues in the area.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Councilor Govan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matt, so I know that we have a resolution coming up, to not put in any more pipeline in our city. Is this, a line that's, I guess, being used currently by our customers in the city?
Yes, there are customers. There are approximately, let me look here. I don't have the exact number, but I'd guess anywhere from 50 to 100 customers on this main in the area. Existing gas customers.
Okay. Do you know, Matt, if Eversource Gas has any plans possibly to maybe transition gas customers to more clean energy, so that when maybe something like this happens in the future, you guys could start thinking about what other sources of energy can be used instead of gas?
Well,
or you don't know that?
Yeah, I mean, Eversource is both, as you know, an electric and gas company. So, you know, we're not adverse to one or the other. The only issue that arises is, you know, customers, you've got 100 customers in the neighborhood and they've all got existing equipment. And, you know, that all would have to be replaced, upgraded. So, you know, it's coming, but it takes time. That's all. And you know, these people they need heat in the winter until that can be done.
Definitely. Yeah, because I think we had talked about, I'm not sure if it was at this meeting or if I was in a different meeting, but we talked about that, and I think that Eversource is planning to invest, actually in the pipeline. They're planning to invest all this money into kind of like an extra pipeline. So maybe using some of that money to transition those customers to clean energy, if it's electricity for now, you know, or whatever, or even solar, right? Something that you guys might want to think about. I know you probably don't have the ability to do that right now, but I'm hoping that sometime in the future you'll come before us to say, oh, we're replacing this gas line with something else that's cleaner. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Eversource as a company is in full support of clean energy. You know, we have a goal of being carbon neutral by, I believe it's 2030, and we're looking to reduce carbon footprint overall. But the unfortunate truth is just that these things take time. And, you know, like I mentioned before, customers need their heat, they need their hot water, they need to cook, and you know, all of the existing infrastructure already supports gas. So you know, the Long Meadow POD, that's it's a separate project unrelated to this one, but all in all, it all comes down to the same thing, which is we want to supply safe and reliable gas delivery to our existing customers until we can safely transition them over to something more reliable or more renewable. So, you know, that's kind of where we're coming from for now. Yes, we're trying to move towards more sustainable energy, but for the time being, we also need to consider, you know, using our existing methods and doing that as safe as possible.
I appreciate that. And 2030 is only, this is 2022, it's only 8 years away, so you guys have to get on it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. Are there any further questions on the petition for Grenada Terrace?
Yes, Mr. President.
Councilor Perez.
Yes, Matt, one of the concerns from the community, like Councilor Govan says, it's only 8 years. I think that the issue that I'm hearing from the community is that there's no written plan in the process. And we have been requesting for that plan. And if you're saying that 8 years from now, we are going to be going into sustainability energy, where's the plan? And if you have a plan in process, we just asking to see the plan. So I think that's a message that needs to be taken because that's the very concern that the community has. And when it comes to changing all these plaques, putting all this new pipelines. It's also a concern from the community, and it has been reported because it seems that it's the plan of the plan. So therefore, we want to see some action if in 8 years we are going with a sustainability plan. So that's a big concern. And right now, I'm having a meeting on Wednesday. It's the same process, and the concern that the community, the abutters are seeing is that this is going out of the sun and all over the city, and we are concerned if this is the plan of the plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Are there any further questions or comments on the petition? Councilor Davila?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to comment. I do agree that we need to continue to move to efficient energy as quickly as possible. Heck, if we could do it tomorrow, I think I would be pretty happy. But the reality is that here it is what it is. I know we have a resolution in the agenda for later on, and that this kind of relates to that directly, actually. But I do want to bring something to the table. In this area, which is my district, about 8 or 10 years ago, we had a situation in which there was low pressure and the Forest Park Middle School had to be opened up. This happened in the middle of winter where we have very poor pressure. And so I wish we had another way that we could address this right now. But the people in my district, they need to heat, they need gas to cook. And so, I think one step at a time we'll do it. And like I say, I wish we could do tomorrow clean energy. But the reality is the reality. And so just putting that out there as perspective as we continue to talk about this issue, this has real impact on people's lives in either way, in either direction. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Any further questions or comments on the petition from the council? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on approving the petition.
Yes. Councilor Perez?
Abstain.
Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh? Absent. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen? Absent. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton? Yes. Councilor Fenton? Absent. Councilor Whitfield? Yes. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gavon? Yes. Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the petition is approved. Madam Clerk, please call item 2.
I have here a petition for Portsmouth Street.
Is there anyone here to speak to the petition for Portsmouth Street? I believe it is a DPW petition.
Yes, this is Kevin Roy. I'm the Director of Facilities. We have with us Anthony Gordon from Langen and Lester Primos, the new Vice President for Finance Administration.
Kevin, can you just state your name and address for the record?
Sure. It's first name is Kevin, last name is Roy, and it's 263 Alden Street, Springfield.
Thank you. The floor is yours to present the petition.
Anthony, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
You can go ahead and I can fill in where you need me to.
Sure. So currently, Springfield College is working on a couple different projects. That pertains to this is we're doing a new parking lot on Portsmouth Street. And basically, Portsmouth runs east to west, parallel to Alden from Eastern to Sheffield Street. And at this, what we own both sides of Portsmouth, and I don't know, Anthony can help me out with the length of the street. Basically, a block, and we own both sides of the street, so we're hoping to just, take over ownership of that street, just so we can, so we can do snow removal, so we can, get our pedestrians to and from campus. that's where we are with the project.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the City Council? Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Kevin. So I just want to make sure that I understood you correctly. I'm looking at a written description by Lincoln for road discontinuance of Portsmouth Street. Okay, so that's you. So you
Correct.
say that you own both sides of the street. What do you mean?
We own all the property, the full length of Portsmouth Street, on the north and the south side of the street.
So you own the properties on that street, basically.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what's on? My apologies, my eyesight is betraying me here. I can barely see the and I got my glasses on. Eastern Avenue in what street is that? On the other side?
It is Sheffield on the east side.
Sheffield Street. Okay. So what on those streets? Are there houses there?
No, it was parking on one portion of it, and there was some unpaved, gravel and some grass that was in that area. That street has, the only building that's on that street is our campus police.
I know that there's buildings over there, residential buildings that are not owned by you, right?
Not on Portsmouth.
So basically you own the whole thing?
Correct.
Okay, so you're telling me that there's no residents in that area? That's what you're telling me?
Well, there's residents that would be on the Alden Street side, not on Portsmouth, but north of that street, and then residents on the south side of the next block lower. It is a residential neighborhood other than the college.
Okay, and so this wouldn't create a hardship to the residents of that area?
I don't believe so. It's not really, it's never truly been used. I mean, there is some cut through, some cars will cut through there, but if you go up one block, you're on Alden, and if you go south one block, you're on, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the street that's south of it, so Shillingford. So if you were looking to, even from, if you were going from, say, not Eastern, but Portsmouth, if you were anywhere on that road, you'd be going to the college, basically, because even to the east of that, is all college property. That's where we're working on the new Health Science Center, which is right at the end of Portsmouth Street.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Are there any further questions on the Portsmouth Street petition? Seeing none, then without objection, Madam Clerk will ask you to call the roll on approving the petition.
Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh, absent Councilor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Allen, absent Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton. Yes, Councilor Fenton. Absent Councilor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Govan.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman.
Yes. Madam Clerk, how many yeses is that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
The petition is approved. Madam Clerk, please call item 3.
I have here FY23 SSYI grant increase, $1,950,000.
Is there anybody here to speak to the SSYI grant increase?
Thank you, Mr. President. Lindsay Hackett, Deputy CAFO. So this is an increase for FY23 for the SSYI grant. And the amount is $1.95 million. And we do have Captain Keenan here for any specific questions about the grant.
Thank you, Deputy CAFO. Captain Keenan, did you want to add anything before we take questions? Sir, you are muted.
I apologize, Councilman. No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Detective Keenan or Deputy CAFO Hackett relative to item 3? Councilor Govan.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we did actually discuss this in the Finance Committee meeting with Chairwoman Whitfield. And a question that I had was, do you guys have any data on how the money is being used and how effective it is in decreasing youth violence in the city?
We do. The data is compiled by UMass Medical School, and the stats from last year was for every $1 spent, saves as much as $7.31. 139 fewer violent crimes per month, and a 31% reduction last year in aggravated assaults, and a 25% reduction in homicides. We have the most successful program in the state. And those are UMass Medical numbers, not ours.
Okay, all right. Also, I think I saw somewhere that some of the money is being used for mental health services for youth. Is that true?
Yes, that is.
And so I actually use the Public Health Institute, who I think works with UMass, to get data from them. And a lot of times that data about the mental health services that youth receive are lacking, and they need a lot more help with that. How are you guys working on that issue?
Councilor, I might have misspoken. We identify individuals between the ages of 17 and 24. If you're looking for younger than that, that's not applied to this grant.
No, those are youth.
Okay, okay. Making sure you didn't mean younger than that. Can you repeat the question again, please?
I was asking how the grant is used to address youth mental health, which includes the 17 to 24 age range.
I can't speak to specifics, but what we do with the police department, we purely identify people, and we usually those who are high-risk people that are being victims or perpetrators of shooting, stabbing, violence, or known gang members. Behavioral health, their components, they connect the client to a licensed clinic. They do an assessment, some consulting, and they're involved with the counseling services through behavioral health.
Yeah, and I know you guys use, I think CSO, Community Support Options, as well as Bay State, it seems. Okay, I would like, I guess, maybe more specific data around that if possible, because as we know, there is a lot of youth violence in the city, and I don't know, because I don't know what potentially could be, if that's what you guys are doing, but it just seems like it's a problem, it's an ongoing problem. I'm just wondering if the collaboration could be extended, to other places, because I know one entity can't do it all. And it looks like you have great collaborations with the Sheriff's Department, the police. I mean, you guys are the police, ROCA, and Bay State. I'm just wondering if there's other things that can be done as well. But
Sure.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. Councilor Whitfield, followed by Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. So SSYI grant is mostly administered by ROCA, correct?
It's administered by us, Councilor, and we're the lead agency. ROCA, you're right. We just do the fiduciary component to it. You're right.
Right. And is there a component outreach and prevention, or
Yes.
what is it? Outreach
Yes.
and prevention?
Outreach, yes.
Okay. So what I would like to do is have them come in and talk about the program and how it helps the city of Springfield. I think since they are like the lead agency, it'll be better to hear the information from them. So one question that we had is, if we tabled this to get more data around it, would that, like, holding up the grant to September, hurt you being awarded the grant?
Yeah, I was able to talk to Anthony Falvo, who's the lead over at Roca, and obviously we would prefer for it to be approved tonight. But he did say that programming would not stop. But obviously the preference would be for a vote and approval tonight to appropriate the funds and get the contracts going for the next fiscal year.
Anthony Falvo is at Roca?
Yes, he's the one who is in charge of this program as well as Shannon.
Oh, I thought he was at
Tracy, I'm on the line. Tracy, it's Anthony Falvo. Yes.
Mr. Falvo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hi, everyone.
You can sit tight until you're recognized. Thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Whitfield.
Sure, he can speak.
Councilor Whitfield, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, I would like to hear from Anthony. I thought he was at Salvation Army.
I am, but I've been with SSYI since the beginning. My position was the program coordinator for SSY when I was working with the police department, but then the state of Massachusetts removed the lead agency from the police department and put it into Roca. So if you don't mind, if I can just throw a couple of things in that some of the questions that were asked. Sure. Again, this is a 3-year contract for $1.9 million. Basically, this is just level funding for the partners for FY23, FY24, and FY25. Of course, this is just continued funding. The funding is contingent upon the state budget. However, the conference committee today awarded $13 million for FY23, and the actual new SSY RFP will come out in FY26. And going back to your question, this is a very unusual grant. This grant, the oversight is done by ComCorp. This is a data-driven grant. So you asked about data. I have all the data you would need on all the topics. So if I can just for a second, the police department is mandated by the grant to identify the clients. And please remember, the clients of SSY are not Shannon clients. These are the highest risk individuals in the city of Springfield. These are the youth who are identified as the offender or victim of a shooting or stabbing. These are all gang members. So the police identify them. Roca goes to the streets, they hit the doors, they're going inside the prisons. We have a thing called InReach, where we contact these people 3 to 6 months before they hit the streets, so we can start setting them up for services when they get back on the streets. Roca and AISS handles the enrollment and case management. The education piece is done by AISS and Roca for the high sets, GEDs. Bay State Medical Center does the health piece. The employment piece is done by Mass Hire, and the behavioral health is done by Clinical and Support. And I know one of the councils, so this grant is mandated because a lot of our young people have mental health issues, a lot of trauma that they haven't dealt with. So there's an initial behavioral health evaluation done on each client. As I said, this is a very much data-driven grant. I actually have a PowerPoint presentation right in front of me right now. I'm sure you don't want me to go through it and tell you. I could tell you what the stats are in FY21, where Springfield compared to the state. And as Captain said, Springfield, I'm not saying it because it's us, but we've outshined the rest of the state. So I hope that kind of clarifies that. All our numbers are being counted for education, employment, behavioral health, enrollment, outreach, identification. Every client is vetted through the Springfield Police Department to make sure that the right client is getting service. We also started a year and a half ago. We've added females to the program as well. And a lot of these young women who are in the program now were people who were involved with human trafficking. So, the program has done amazing work in Springfield. We started this program back in 2011 under Governor Deval Patrick. This was really his baby. And the program has just continued with Governor Baker. And we've had such support from the House and the Senate. So, I mean, things have been really, really strong over the last 7, 8, 9 years. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you,
That
Councilor. Thank you. I appreciate it.
That helped a lot. And thank you for having that data. And thank you for showing up. We would ask that when these grant opportunities come about, if you guys could come to the finance meeting as well. So then, you know, we don't have to ask it over. Well, some probably will. They don't make the finance meeting, but it'd be helpful if you all come there. But thank you for the info. When you said the mental health services are provided by who?
Clinical support and options, clinical CSO.
CSO, and where are they located?
On Maple Street in Springfield.
Maple Street. And do they have culturally competent, you know, do people look like who they're working with?
Yes, actually, because she actually knows you. Our licensed clinician is Pam Moore. Do you know Pam?
Yeah, very well.
Yes, Pam Moore. Pam Moore is our licensed clinician. She has been with the program since day one. The men love her. They relate well to her. She relates well to the clients. She does an amazing job. I mean, I know you know her, and I think you know the kind of work that she does. And don't forget too, the licensed clinician also helps these guys. These guys are coming out of jail. They may not have insurance. They may not have medical. I mean, so she's there to help them. So this is really a holistic approach. We're taking these clients and we're trying to provide all the services possible. I mean, there's employment, there's unsubsidized employment, there's subsidized employment, there's just, you know, we're trying to set them on the right way. So, and as I said, the program has been extremely successful over the last 10 or so years.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I did meet with Roca about the program also, and they have a plethora of data also. They're very organized with their data. So I do support this grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Whitfield. Thank you, Mr. Falvo. Are there any further questions on item 3? Counselor Devlin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Captain Keenan, Anthony, Falvo. Good evening. I'm going to be brief. Actually, before going, Keenan, can you give me those stats again that you said a little while ago? You said there was 30% reduction in what?
Sure. We're looking at a 31% reduction in aggravated assaults.
Okay. What about gun violence?
Well, you're looking at that in a gun violence, aggravated assault. Gun violence will be classified as aggravated assault. The stats I have aren't broken down that specifically.
Okay. Can we get that?
I mean, we could look at the city's crime stats and you can break down types of aggravated assaults. That's certainly something we can do.
Would you mind doing that, sir? Because I'm kind of curious specifically with gun violence. As you know, unfortunately, we have people now doing ghost guns in the city. And so I personally would like to know, you know, gun-related specifics. Crimes with guns, guns arrest, anything that has to do with guns.
Yeah, sure. I'll send you an email tomorrow. If the crime analysis guys email you, what do you want? How backdated do you want it?
Quarter, just to have last quarter.
Yeah, sure. I'll get that off to you tomorrow, Counselor.
Okay, thank you. And Captain Keenan and Mr. Falvo, I do have one request similar to what Councilor Whitfield did say. I mean, this seems like it's a good program. I think a lot of questions, but I don't want to hold this up. I do ask that things like this, perhaps you may want to come and vet it out in the Public Safety Committee. Maybe we can move this more efficiently. I know this has been in the past in the council, but the reality of it is that, you know, let's be realistic. We still have a crime problem in Springfield, unfortunately. Let's not kid ourselves. Although we've done some gains, we still have a lot of work to do. And so it seems to me like $5 million, close to $6 million is a lot of money. And so I just think that, you know, the public does have the right, and if you know exactly how that money is spent and what is being done, for their own safety here in the city. So, but Captain Keenan, thank you for your service, sir. And Mr. Falvo, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Are there any further questions? Councilor Hurst.
Just really quickly, Captain Keenan, is the reduction that you speak of solely in that age range that you just spoke about as it relates to the grant? Or is that in general?
I'm looking at the grant, right, Counselor. I'm looking at what I have in front of me on the grant right now. I could get you more specific stuff tomorrow. I'm working.
Okay, I was wondering whether,
yeah.
so you said that there was a reduction in aggravated assaults.
Right.
And right, of how much?
31%.
31%. So I guess my question to you is, I don't need it now,
Sure.
but I just wanted to know whether it was within that age range or whether you're talking generally, just because when we think about this data, I would imagine that we're looking at it in respect to those individuals who it's supposed to be impacting. And so if that's as a whole, you know, while it's great news, I just wonder, you know, what that data is broken down for that age range. So just a thought as we move forward, and, you know, when you get a moment or opportunity, I know you got a lot on your plate. Just would love to have that information.
Sure. I'll text you tomorrow. I'll let you know.
Councilor Hurst, if I may add, it is the 17 to 24 population.
Okay.
Okay. Perfect. And also, just one last thing I forgot to mention. In 2021, SSY program has received national recognition from the U.S. Department of Justice as a promising program. So we are very excited by that as well, sir.
Sounds like you all are doing great work. Appreciate the efforts. Would love to have that data, especially if we could get it for like the last 3 to 5 years in terms of that reduction, just because it's significant and it's something we should celebrate.
Yes, and I will also forward you the, they have a yearly report done, or every 5 years it was done, by West Ed and Air Institute. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but it came out, and I will forward it to all the counselors. It's a breakdown of all the stats and all the data, and I'll send each of the counselors the data for FY21 for Springfield compared to the rest of the state, and you can see what we're doing as far as our numbers.
Excellent. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. Are there any further questions on the item? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the grant.
Councilor Perez? Yes. Yes, Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Brown? Councilor Brown? Absent. Councilor Walsh? Absent. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Hurst?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Allen. Absent. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton? Yes, Councilor Fenton? Absent. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Govan?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The grant is accepted. Madam Clerk, item 4.
I have here Court Street and Main Street Transportation Construction Grant, $1.5 million.
Is there anybody present to speak to item 4, Court Street and Main Street Construction Grant?
Thank you, Mr. President. Lindsay Hackett, Deputy CAFO, 80 Tamarack Drive in Springfield. So this grant is a Mass Gaming Commission grant for $1.5 million through their transportation construction program. And it's meant to serve for no more than a 33% match for an overall program cost. And the remainder of the funding will come from a MassDOT grant. And this project is for park and roadway improvements to enhance public engagement in the Main Street and Court Street areas, improving the existing streetscape and increasing pedestrian accessibility to the amenities around the area. It will include street, sidewalk, and plaza paving, landscaping, lighting, street furnishings, pedestrian crossings at Main Street, infrastructure and utility upgrades, streetscape signage, and a reconfiguration, hardscape, lighting, landscape, and street furnishings for the pedestrian alley from Court Street through Main Street. I'm sorry, from Court Street through to State Street, that pedestrian walkway there through Court Square.
Thank you, Deputy Capo. Are there any questions from the council? Seeing none, Councilor Govan.
I'm sorry, the only question I think that came up in the, finance meeting was that if, these funds could be used further up, I guess State Street, maybe into Mason Square. I know that, Indian Orchard has been very, blessed to have received a lot of grants to do improvements, but I know that Councilor Whitfield asked about other areas of the city. I know it is a gaming commission grant, targeted to, MGM downtown. And I just heard that the Mass DOT is matching, so I'm wondering if there's a possibility to use some of that money, up the road to other parts of the city.
Yeah, so I was going to forward, when they open up the grant submissions again, I was going to forward the eligibility requirements over to the council. They're not open right now, but this grant that we received is specific to this project, and the eligibility requirements are specific to mitigate the impacts of the casino. So really this area is where the 1.5 is eligible for. Not to say there's not other grants out there for other things, but this is specific to that area and to mitigate any casino impacts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the grant.
Councilor Perez? Yes. Yes. Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown? Yes. Councilor Brown? Absent. Councilor Walsh? Absent. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen? Absent. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton? Absent. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Govan?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes. Madam Clerk, how many yeses was that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Votes are sufficient. The grant is accepted. Madam Clerk, item 5.
I have here Mass Call 3 grant, $337,500.
Is there anybody present to speak to item 5, the Mass Call 3 grant?
Good evening, Helen Carlton Harris, 47 Overlook Drive, Springfield, Commissioner, Department of Health and Human Services. The Mass Call 3 grant is a collaboration between Chicopee, Holyoke, and Springfield. Springfield is the lead agency. It is to develop strategies, curriculums to intervene on substance use disorder amongst school-age children. The superintendents of all 3 districts are extremely participating in this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any questions from the council? Seeing no questions, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the grant.
Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown? Absent. Councilor Walsh? Absent. Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen? Absent. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton? Absent. Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Govan?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes, votes are sufficient. The grant is accepted. Madam Clerk, item 6.
I have FY23 local consumer aid grant, $113,000.
Deputy Capo.
Thank you. Actually, Millie's here, so she can speak to the grant.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Director Johnson.
Milagros Johnson, I'm Director of the Springfield Mayor's Office of Consumer Information, 46 Rachel Terrace, Westfield. It's a program, a low consumer program funded by the Attorney General's Office. We provide services to consumers throughout Hampden County and parts of Worcester County. This year, it's a very slight increase from the previous year. And the program is for educating consumers on their rights and assisting with resolving consumer complaints.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Are there any questions for the director on the grant? Oh, Counselor Govan, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Getting used to it.
Thank you so much, Director, for being here. Something that came up in the finance meeting, is about advertising of your office. I remember a few years ago, I used to see some commercials possibly, to make people aware of the office. And I think at this time, maybe people have forgotten or there's different ways of communicating. So I'm just wondering if there's a way for us to maybe do that part of it. And Milagros and I went to Commerce together, the same class.
Yes, we
That's my
did.
classmate. Go
Yes,
Raiders.
thank you for your question. So to answer it, we don't per se do any advertising. The grant doesn't allow for funding for advertising, but we use our resources such as the Attorney General's office, the city website, our own social media, such as our Twitter account. We have a podcast, we have connections and cooperate with many local agencies and including the senior centers. So it's more word of mouth, which to me is much more effective than if we were to pay for an advertisement. That's what I feel anyway at this point after doing this job for 21 years.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess I just would like to see more people know about it. Do you know if it's in the Good Neighbor Handbook?
It should be. I believe the last time that it was distributed, we were included in it. Yes.
Good, yeah. And I know that one of our councils is working on a resource guide, I think, for.
Yes,
the
and
city.
we are included in that. Thank you for including us in that program. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Counselor Govan, are there any further questions? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the grant.
Yes. Counselor Perez? Yes. Yes. Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Brown? Absent. Counselor Walsh? Absent. Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Hurst? Counselor Hurst?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Yes. Counselor Allen? Absent. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton? Absent. Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Govan?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The grant is accepted. Madam
you,
Clerk,
Councilor.
please call the next item. Thank you.
I have the Mass in Motion Grant Award, $110,752.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody here to speak to the Mass in Motion grant?
Helen Carlton Harris, 47 Overlook Drive, Springfield. Mass in Motion is a grant that we've had for at least 10 years. It is for health and wellness. It's also for policy development to assure that our residents have policies in place that support their health and support their wellness.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any questions for the Commissioner? Seeing none? Without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to accept the grant.
Yes. Counselor Perez? Yes. Yes. Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Brown? Absent. Counselor Walsh? Absent. Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen? Absent. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton? Absent. Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Govan?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The grant is approved. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Item number 8, DPW rideshare funding, $32,317.80.
Is there anybody here to speak to this item? This is item 8, DPW rideshare funding.
So is the $50,000 grant rule still in effect, or?
Oh, I apologize. Items 8 and 9 are under $50,000, and we can take them together without objection.
Do we have to make a motion? No objection.
Nope.
All right.
Madam Clerk, without objection, please call the roll to accept items 8 and 9, accept the grants.
Counselor Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Brown? Absent. Counselor Walsh? Yes, Counselor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen. Absent, Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton. Absent, Counselor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Gavon.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The grants are accepted. Madam Clerk, please call item 10.
I have an order here for Community Preservation Committee FY '23 grant.
Chairman McCarroll.
Thank you, Council President. This is Bob McCarroll, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, 96 Elliott Street. And we have before you our fiscal '23 budget. We are anticipating that between local tax levy and the state distribution, that the CPA revenue will be $2,628,000. As councilors may remember, state law requires that we set aside 10% for community housing, historic resources, open space and recreation, and that amount is $262,800. We have an administrative budget of $69,850, and that leaves in the unallocated reserves $1,769,750.
Thank you, Chairman McCarroll. Are there any questions? Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, just a couple questions, Bob. Your administrative line item budget, how do you arrive at that?
It is primarily for our part-time administrative consultant, which is, we spend about $47,000 we're expecting this year. The rest of it is like office supplies, office equipment. We have a minute secretary. We have to hold an annual hearing, and we have to place ads in the newspaper. We belong to the statewide coalition of community preservation communities. We pay for the banners that when you're driving around the city where you see active projects, there are banners hanging out there that say this project funded by the residents of Springfield through the Community Preservation Act. And this year, because we're starting the Historic Homes program, we need a preservation consultant to make sure that the work being done to the historic homes meets the Secretary of the Interior standards. Let me just say, the state law allows us to set aside 5% for administration. And that would be more than $100,000 based on what we're expecting. So our budget is relatively modest in terms of expenses.
Completely understand, Bob, and I appreciate your detailed response. And really the reason I was asking was because I've stumbled across a couple of those meetings as you all deliberate over which projects to approve and which to not approve. Just is not easy work, but love the fact that you guys are able to vet just about all of the projects that come through, if not all of them, and ultimately make a tough decision at the end. And so my thought is that if there's any way that we can get your team any sort of stipends, you all deserve it. And, I appreciate the work that you do and the projects that come of it. So thanks so much.
Oh, well, thank you. And just so the council knows, we will probably be getting you our recommendations this year once you resume in September.
Excellent to hear. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. Are there any further questions? Seeing none. Without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to authorize the Community Preservation Committee budget.
Yes. Counselor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Brown? Absent, Counselor Walsh? Absent, Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen? Absent, Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton? Absent, Counselor Whitfield? Counselor Whitfield?
Yes, sorry.
Yes. Counselor Kavan?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes, votes are sufficient, and the order is approved. Thank you, Chairman McCarroll. Madam Clerk, please call item 11.
Polling location change.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This was placed on the agenda by our city clerk. Madam Clerk, are you going to speak to this, or is Gladys with us virtually?
I'm not sure.
Good evening, Shavina Martin, 143 Catherine Street, Deputy Election Commissioner. I'm going to speak to items 11 and 12 on tonight.
We take both of them together?
Thank you so much. Shavina, go ahead on item 11, the polling location change.
So tonight, Council, before you, we present two polling location changes. Both of these polling locations are dual polling locations. Our first one is for our polling location that is currently at 414 Chestnut Street, which is the Bay State Place Apartments. And it houses our polling location for wards 1D and 1E. The Bay State Place Apartments is currently under construction. It has been for 2 years. And with the assistance of Councilor Perez, we were able to find a temporary polling location for this election year and possibly for 2023 if construction isn't complete. And so it's a temporary polling location located at the Emily Bill Park Pool House in the Lower Liberty Heights Center. And so that is the first location that we are looking to get your approval for. It's a temporary change. The next change is a permanent change, which Councilor Walsh has been advocating for this change for about 4 years with the assistance of Councilor Davila. And it is our polling location. It's also a dual polling location that was currently at the Forest Park Library. And we are looking to move it across the street to the Forest Park Middle School. And Principal Macon there has been amazing in opening her doors and welcoming us in. In the past, a few decades ago, this was the original polling location for 6A and B, and we had to move it across the street to the library when the middle school underwent renovations. And so now we're looking to move it back there. It is a more ideal location for voters. It has a greater handicap accessibility. It has a greater space, and it's much more convenient. It's directly right across the street from the Forest Park Library, so it wouldn't be an inconvenience to voters. And that would be a permanent change.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Does that conclude your testimony?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions relative to the polling location changes in item 11? Councilor Davila?
I just have more of a comment, Mr. President. I do think that the change, at least in my district, from 6A to 6B to 46 Oakland Street is a welcome sight. It's much going to be easier for the residents to vote, and also it's going to be easier in traffic. We know when voting there, it could get hectic, and so I'm just very happy to see this, and I'm enthusiastic in support of this.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Any further questions or comments on item 11? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll to authorize the order for polling location changes.
Yes. Counselor Perez? Yes. Yes. Counselor Curran?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Brown? Absent. Counselor Walsh? Absent. Counselor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen? Absent. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton? Absent. Counselor Whitfield?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Gavon?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes, votes are sufficient. The change is granted. Madam Clerk, please call item 12.
Item 12, polling early voting schedule, 2022 state elections.
Ms. Martin?
Yes, before you, Counselor, is our early voting schedule that has been set by the Secretary of the Commonwealth for both our August early voting, which is in preparation for the state preliminary election, and also for our October early voting hours, which dates which are in advance of our November general election.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Are there any questions? Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. President. Shabina, good evening. I see here the schedule, and you got 3 locations that residents can vote in. One of them is going to be Greenleaf Community Center, Raymond Jordan, and City Hall. Now, are we, or is the state mailing the ballot applications, or are we doing it? Who's going to pay for it?
So those have already gone out, and you should have received them. I know many voters have already received them and returned them. I've received mine over the weekend, so they went out. The deadline for the Secretary of the Commonwealth to get them out to voters is July 23rd, so they are going out.
Right, so actually, I received mine this morning, this afternoon, actually, and, but that was sent out by the state, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I guess, Mr. President, I don't know if my question is relevant to this, but I know that we have a voter notification ordinance authored by you, actually. Is that planning to evolve right now in this election, notifying the residents and address that if you choose to the president?
Councilor Davila, it does not, but I am chairing the meeting currently.
Okay, that's right. So that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, you don't want to speak to it. So, Shabina, can you answer that question or not?
And
About the
do you
voter-
mind repeating the question? I couldn't quite hear it, Councilor
The
Davila.
voter notification, is that, are we notifying residents there's going to be an election?
So the voter notification that was proposed and passed by Councilor Letterman is during municipal elections. This is a state election year.
Municipal elections only, okay.
Yes.
All right, that's good information to know. Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on authorizing the early voting schedule.
Yes. Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Corres?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Brown? Absent Councilor Walsh? Absent Councilor Davila?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Earth?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen? Absent Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton? Absent Councilor Whitfield?
Yes.
Councilor Whitfield? Yes. Councilor Cavan?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman?
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The voting schedule is authorized.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Members, item 13 is our next item. It requires a 2/3 majority vote, as do a number of other items that are remaining in our financial orders. It seems that at this time, we only have 8 members present virtually or in person. And so my suggestion is that we move to the items that continue to require a majority vote. And if we do not regain a quorum of 9 members, we can decide what to do with those items that require 2/3 at that time. So without objection, Madam Clerk, please call item 14.
Yes. Supporting a budget transfer within a department, $101,400,000.
Is there anybody here to speak to item 14, budget transfer for $1.4 million?
Yes, thank you, President. Mr. President. So this is a budget transfer from the capital reserve, which we transferred money over in the last meeting of fiscal 22. We transferred $2.5 million over to this account. We're looking to transfer 1.4 of that over to an account for the use for SRA for property acquisition, which the details of that had been discussed in executive session a couple times.
Thank you, Deputy Caffo. Are there any further questions on item 14? Seeing no further questions, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on authorizing the budget transfer.
Yes. Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Curran.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Brown. Absent Counselor Walsh. Absent Counselor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth. Counselor Hurst.
Yes. Yes.
Counselor Allen. Absent Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton. Absent Counselor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Gavon.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the transfer is approved. The next item is item 16, without objection.
Order approving a permanent utility easement to N-Star, Eversource, and Verizon at 680 Union Street.
Is there anybody here to speak to item 16 on the utility easement?
Mr. President, Kathleen Breck, City of Springfield Law Department, Deputy City Solicitor. This easement is requested for Eversource to provide electrical service to the new DeBerry Elementary School, which is under construction on that's 660 Union Street.
Thank you, Attorney Breck. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on item 16, granting the easement.
Yes. Counselor Perez.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Curran.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Brown. Absent Counselor Walsh. Absent Counselor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth. Counselor
Yes.
Earth.
Yes. Yes.
Counselor Allen. Absent Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton. Absent Counselor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Gavon.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient and the easement is granted. Members, item 17 actually needs to be taken after item 18 because the funds must be appropriated first. Item 18 requires a 2/3 majority vote. And so in keeping with what we are currently doing, I would move now without objection to item 19. Madam Clerk, item 19, please.
Yes. Springfield City Council remote participation policy.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. As I place this agenda item on, I'm going to turn the gavel over to Vice President Edwards, who is very conveniently seated right next to the gavel, so I don't have to hand it too far.
President Letterman.
Thank you, Vice President Edwards. So thank you to everybody who was able to participate in the General Government Committee meeting last week that was held. As Councilor Fenton indicated, at that meeting we discussed the proposed remote participation policy. I hope that folks have had a chance to review it, but just to give you an idea of where we are currently at, our hope and intention was to bring the council back to in-person meetings for our August hearings meeting. The reason we are here in a hybrid format today is because there was not an extension granted of the open meeting law early enough for us to notice this meeting, and it was very important to me to see this meeting take place as we had hearings and departments waiting for approvals from the City Council, and I think that we have an obligation to conduct the business of the people on the schedule that we set at the beginning of the year. So I'm thankful to the councilors who were able to be here, both in person and virtually, to ensure that we were able to keep this meeting. As you know, the law that allows fully virtual meetings was extended again over the weekend, signed by the governor until 2023. And so at this time, we have a couple of options before us. And what my proposal is that we do return to in-person meetings for our hearings and regular meetings, beginning with our August 22nd meeting, that we allow for virtual meetings to continue to take place for committee meetings, because we've seen a lot of benefit in virtual committee meetings, and that we authorize the remote participation policy that is before us today so that we do still get the benefit of remote participation when it is appropriate. The way that this remote participation policy would operate is that when meetings are called for regular and hearing meetings by the president, the meeting is in person, and individuals both with business before the council and members of the body are expected and encouraged to attend in person. However, with the permission of the chair, they may participate remotely under certain circumstances, those circumstances being that they are ill, that they are caring for an ill family member, that they are involved in an emergency situation, that they have a significant geographic distance due to unforeseen circumstances, as well as military service. And this would allow for us to be able to utilize virtual participation. It would also allow for us to allow members of the public to virtually participate in both future committee meetings that might take place in person, as well as full hearings from long distances. And so if we wanted to bring in an expert from Boston or DC or anywhere in the country, we would have the opportunity to have that benefit under this remote participation policy. I do want to thank Focus Springfield. They've been working really closely with us, Steve Carey, Josue, and Brendan, about how we can outfit both our council chamber, our committee meeting room, and actually really every meeting room at City Hall to allow for a seamless integration. Even here in this conference room today, we're making it work, but the way that we have the plans designed for the chamber and committee meeting room will really allow for an even more seamless integration. You'll still be able to see everybody up close like you would normally on our previous streams prior to the COVID pandemic, and really have individuals feel as if they are there when they are not able to be. And so I'm happy to take any questions. I do have one just very slight technical amendment that will need to be made before we adopt this policy, but I do want to take any questions that individuals may have. And I want to say one more thing relative to a portion of the policy. Many of you saw the executive order that was granted by the mayor. That is what allows us to have a policy like this in place. The state open meeting law outside of the extension for virtual meetings says that in order for any remote participation to take place, the executive must issue an executive order saying that participation can be remote, and that applies not just to the city council, but to all city boards and commissions. The open meeting law outside of the extension says that in order for a public meeting to take place with remote participation, the chair and a quorum of the body must be present in the chamber or in the public meeting location in order for remote participants to go forward. Now, within the policy, we have indicated that that particular requirement will be suspended relative to the emergency order. However, once again, if a meeting is called in person, the expectation would be that people attend in person unless they submit a request to the chair relative to the provisions of the remote participation policy. And once we find ourselves eventually back into the full spectrum of the open meeting law, once the emergency order is expired, committee meetings at that time, if they wanted to have a virtual component, would be subject to that same requirement of a quorum. So you'd have to have 2 members of the committee in person, and then you could have virtual participation. So that is the summary of the remote policy. I want to thank the mayor and Tom Ash for issuing the executive order. I also want to thank the law department, Tom Moore, our new attorney, Ken Shea, who's with us today, and Judge Payne, who assisted in making sure that the policy was drafted in compliance with the open meeting law. And with that, Vice President Edwards, I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions, either virtually or in the presence of in the room as presently?
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Curran.
Councilor Letterman, just a quick question. So is this ordinance, is that in response to the pandemic, or is this like a new, because of Zoom technology? Is that the reason why we're going to go forward with in terms of this? What is the interplay with the pandemic and COVID-19 going on with this?
Correct. So I think that the pandemic showed us the tool that we have in terms of virtual participation in certain circumstances. I personally still see a great deal of value in our meeting in person, having public deliberation, having the public come in and be able to speak in public, speak out, and be heard, as well as sit in the chamber and view the work of government that ultimately is accountable to them. But I think we've also seen that virtual participation can be valuable in making sure that we have continuity of government under many circumstances. And so that is the reason for bringing the policy forward.
So going forward, when the pandemic is subsided, we're still going to, just historically, from this step forward, we're going to have Zoom meetings and in-person meetings together in the council chamber.
So the meetings will be called in person in the council chamber. Members are encouraged and expected to attend in person unless they receive leave to participate virtually via the remote participation policy, because they qualify under one of the guidelines explicitly detailed in the remote participation policy.
And maybe I'm a little bit confused. Would there be a situation where you can have 7 in-person members and then 6 on Zoom? And perhaps we could set up a situation where you can have monitors, where you can see the other counselors on Zoom?
Yes, so in the event that there was a circumstance where 6 members needed to be remote because all of them fell under the remote participation policy, we would be able to accommodate that.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I do have a few questions, Councilor Letterman. And I just want to make sure I understand this because I'm not sure that's why you're So we're moving forward and we're doing a hybrid model. We are having some members could be remote, other people could be physically present. And so I believe that according to this, what you're proposing is that we have to have a quorum of 7 people, correct?
So open meeting law, outside of the extension granted to the emergency orders by the legislature, requires that a quorum of the body, or a majority of the body, be present physically in the posted meeting location.
So state law requires that 7 people.
In our case, yes, it would be 7.
And when does that go into effect?
So that will go into effect at the expiration of the existing emergency order, which was just extended to, I want to say, December of 2023.
Okay, so we need to have 7 councilors present and the other 6 or whatever, if they choose to virtual. Is that correct? Is that what I'm?
If 6 members were granted leave under the remote participation policy, yes, that'd be permissible.
And that was actually my other question. When you say extended leave, I can see that you are suggesting that, if I understand it correctly, if I'm not, please let me know, that we have to ask the chair for what you call leave, participate remotely.
That is correct. So
what criteria are you going to use to determine that?
So that is straight out of the open meeting law. Attorney Moore, who helped draft the remote participation policy, was able to provide, those circumstances that would comply with the open meeting law. That was my first question to him, Councilor Davila, was, who's responsible for determining relative to the compliance with the remote participation policy. And in the case of this policy, it would be the chair of either the city council, which is the president, or in the case of a committee that was meeting virtually or having remote participation, it would be the chair of that committee.
In terms of I understand that part, in terms of the actual protocol or procedure they're going to be used to determine who gets leave or not, because if that 7 requests suddenly, how is the chair or the president in this particular case going to decide who gets it, who doesn't?
So my intention is to approve requests that fall within the guidelines of the policy. So as long as the counselor has reached out and made their request, I believe we're all adults and professionals. We all take our job seriously. I expect that counselors are going to make an effort, certainly to be present for scheduled meetings, and that the circumstances that would lead them to remote participation would be that of an emergency circumstance. So if I could finish my comment, Councilor Davila, my point would be simply that if it led to the point where there was such an emergency that more than a majority of the city council could not be present, at that point, we would have no choice under the open meeting law to cancel the meeting. But I think if that level of emergency arose, we may be considering at that point a fully virtual meeting anyways, because I would expect that by that time there would be something amid, like a pandemic going on. So I would hope that we wouldn't be regularly encountering that. But certainly, as with any policy implementation, if we encounter a scenario that requires a change to the policy is that of the council. So it can always be amended at any point.
That's great. I agree with you. All of us are professionals and all take our job seriously here, but we also, as you state, this is not about a particular council, but moving forward, because we don't know how long this policy is going to be effective. I mean, we could have 3 or 4 prices down the road, and we still don't know what we have. So and I agree with you, and this is to ensure that there is continuity and that we don't throw any wrinkles that we may not intend to in the process. And so I do have, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for your work and your passion on this, because I can feel your passion for that. I thank you. And so I do have some minor suggestions that I'm going to propose in a second, but I will look back in a second. But I would like to hear what my other colleagues have to say.
Are there any other questions or comments from either virtually or members present?
It's appropriate for me to say anything as a part of if anyone has questions about how things might work logistically.
Are there any questions? I see some hands are up right now, but what you may have caught was the representative from Focus Springfield is available to answer any technical questions related to what we're being proposed. I'm not exactly sure who rose first, so without objection, Councilor Whitfield, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is, so this proposed virtual meeting, in-person meeting came directly from the law that was written? I'm sorry, I did not have a chance to read it. Or is this something that you would like to see and you pull pieces out of the law? So do we have to do it this way, or this is the way that you see it, Councilor Letterman?
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. So the executive order is pulled from the open meeting law. It's required to be issued. The executive order requires that the body adopt a policy. And so my ask for the law department was that they assisted us in drafting a policy that would comply with the open meeting law. And to the extent that this policy existed is to comply with the open meeting law. The only piece of the policy that would be impacted by the extension of the emergency order is the requirement that there be at least 7 individuals present in the physical location. That is suspended because the open meeting law, that aspect of it is suspended. So the policy is pulled from the open meeting law to comply with it.
So what I'm trying to understand is the executive order that the governor signed. Does it say we have to follow what the open meeting law, the current open meeting law that's in effect? Is that what the executive order is saying, that we have to write a policy that aligns with the current open meeting law?
If we want to have remote participation within the open meeting law, we must adopt a policy and an executive order from the mayor, which we have the executive order from the mayor. This is the policy that I'm proposing we adopt. The order that is in place now, or the legislation that has been passed by the legislature suspending aspects of the open meeting law and allowing for fully virtual events or fully virtual meetings, that is now in effect again. As we talked about, that was passed, extended over the weekend and signed by the governor. So theoretically, Councilor Whitfield, we as a body could choose to continue to have exclusively virtual meetings. But my proposal is that we return our regular and hearings meetings to in-person, and that we adopt a remote participation policy to govern remote participation.
So I'm going to say that I don't agree with the policy for a couple reasons. Number one, I feel like we were able to get more participation from the community with virtual remote learning. There's a lot of times that seniors and others, maybe folks with disability, would love to be able to come and speak or hear what's going on in the meetings. And while they could watch Focus, they might want to do a public speak out, but can't make it down to City Hall in order to do that. And I've seen folks that I probably hadn't seen before have the ability to participate in city council meetings. And so as long as we can offer that, I would like to, even if it's just through 2023, I would love to continue to be able to have folks do that. There are some instances that I agree with being in public, like for hearings meetings, so we don't have to have the dual meetings, so we don't have to have 2. Other than that, I don't see where it's a dire necessity. It's really easier to manage a household on Zoom. Like, some people may not be able to relate because they don't have the responsibilities that others have. And I'm gonna speak for myself. I'm not gonna speak for everyone else. They may not have what I have at home, what's going on, where I need to be. And I don't want to be absent, but going to a full participation meeting, sometimes it may cause me to have to be absent or late more than I have to do right now. And I'm not saying that, one day we will have to return to the full body, but I think as long as we can extend it, that's what I would like to do. So that's my opinion. I'm not going to support this particular policy, but maybe you could come back to the table with something that's a little bit more convenient, maybe for folks with disabilities and families, and then, we can reconsider it. Thank you.
Councilor Whitfield, relative to your point, I actually agree with you wholeheartedly, but I would disagree with you that this policy would prevent individuals who are in need of participating virtually under the circumstances that you described. I disagree that this policy would prevent them from doing this. As a matter of fact, it is the adoption of a remote participation policy and the work that we've negotiated with Focus Springfield and the administration that will allow for that type of participation to take place continuing into the future and really into the, continuing forever. If we fail to adopt a remote participation policy that complies with open meeting law, when the event occurs that open meeting law is back in full force, we would have no option for remote participation. And so my expectation in allowing us to adopt a reasonable remote participation policy for regular and hearings meetings, and I agree with you, it is really critical that we have our hearings meetings come back in person for a number of reasons, one of which is relative to the length of time it takes to do hearings exclusively virtual for businesses, as well as the cost that is increased in advertising. So again, my intention as the president is to be even and fair with the allowance of virtual participation. Under the current executive or under the current legislation, the requirement for there to be 7 individuals present in the chamber would not be in effect. That would only come into effect in the event that there was an open meeting law that came back into full effect. So my hope and intention would be to allow for individuals who are facing those circumstances during a regular hearings meeting to be able to participate virtually. That would be my intention.
So for a regular meeting, just for clarification, regular meetings, we will need to be in person unless there's an emergency.
So I would describe, my intention of an emergency would be anything that prevents you from being available in person. And so if you had, for example, a family emergency, a child care emergency, a situation that prevented you or anybody, I'm just speaking in general, when I say you, I mean general public and participation, any circumstance that would allow me to approve, I would be intending to approve. I trust our colleagues and I trust those that appear before us relative to that, but we must adopt some policy in order to ensure that we have remote participation into the future.
Okay, and then my final.
Council Whitfield, I thought, and I'm not speaking for you, but I think the gist of your question had to do with those who may be inconvenient to come to City Hall, which had been historically the case. Would it be inappropriate at this moment to hear a little bit about what Focus Springfield has been charged with trying to do to address some of those concerns? Would there be any objections to sharing some of the thoughts and plans from Focus Springfield? Because to your point, we want the public to continue to be able to have access, and I believe what we have today in this chamber or in this room is not what we envisioned when we perhaps by the first of the year when everything is ordered and in place. So without objection, the representative, could you? Without objection.
Sure.
Please identify yourself for the committee, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. Brendan Holland, 114 Winton Street in Springfield, Massachusetts, and also Focus Springfield, 1200 Main Street. I've been hanging out with you guys for a long time, and I think this is my first time as a part of these meetings. Steve is on vacation, so you all are stuck with me. So we're currently in the middle of working on a plan together with a lot of different collaborators, people within City Hall. We're working closely with TJ to actually be able to fund this project. We're working with Andy and the whole IT department to make sure everything gets installed and will run properly. Pat Sullivan's team is going to help us actually run the cables to make everything function. It's really a big collaborative process from within City Hall, and we're really grateful for Jesse and the whole City Council and also the Mayor's office for making these connections happen. I won't speak too much, but we will be installing a system with some TVs in the room, so people are able to see what's happening on Zoom, These TVs will also be able to be used for presentations, PowerPoints, pictures, things like that, really bringing us into the digital age. We'll also be making an investment in new cameras and microphones that are needed for this system to function properly. All this together for both your chambers and room 220 across the hall, think more closer to the price of a house than a used car, but well worth the investment, and we're hoping to make that happen soon. It will likely happen in phases. I'm sure you all have heard about supply chain issues, and that has hit audiovisual technology just as hard as anything else. So as soon as we hit that purchase button, things will kind of start to trickle in. And really the target is by the first of the year, we'll have a fully functioning system, but we will have a system that functions in some capacity by that August meeting. Again, assuming this policy is passed this evening. We will have something that can function for the August meeting, and then as more stuff comes in, we'll be able to add to it until we have a beautiful, elegant system that will be the envy of municipalities across the state of Massachusetts. So, thank you all for your patience throughout this transition. If anyone ever has any questions, they can feel free to give us a shout. Most of you have my cell or my email. But Steve is the guy who can actually answer questions, so you know him first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Councilor Hurst, your patience just for another moment, please. Councilor Whitfield, does that help address your specific concern about access, public access?
I think it helps with access where people can still watch it, but they could always watch it. So what about public speak out? Do they now have to also come to chambers every time, or is there an option where they can also still use Zoom feature?
I'm glad you asked about that, Councilor Whitfield. I think the public speak out is one area where we should continue to offer a hybrid option, because I think that for residents to have the opportunity to address the council virtually is a fantastic option. And when we look at the setup that we'll have in the council chamber, I think it will be very appropriate for individuals to be able to do that. And so my hope would be to continue to allow for, especially with regard to public speak out, a virtual option for residents.
Thank you. Is that in this policy?
It is not in the policy because the policy is only required to place the requirements for members of the public body. The participation of the audience is not actually addressed in the open meeting law in that regard relative to virtual or remote. I did ask about that. The only requirement that exists in the open meeting law, to my understanding, based on my interaction with the law department, is that obviously if a meeting is posted in person, it must be open and accessible in terms of individuals being able to view the meeting. But in terms of our granting remote participation to members of the public and participants in the meeting, that is exclusively at the discretion of the body. And so my intention would be to apply a fairly similar standard that we are applying to members, with the exception of public speak out, where my intention would be to allow for a hybrid model, where similarly to what we did today, where individuals could let us know what aspect would work for them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield.
Councilor Hurst, thank you for your patience. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of different things, and some of which Councilor Whitfield touched upon. I think one of my biggest frustrations as folks start to return from the pandemic is that we oftentimes tend to return to the things that are most familiar and comfortable to us. And so, as we think about moving back in person to the chambers, I guess one of the things that Councilor Whitfield touched on that I thought was extremely relevant is that we ought to try to be as flexible as possible to the extent we can under the state requirements, especially as it relates to counselors and their potential attendance remotely. I also think what it would do is that you might have more individuals who might be willing to actually participate in government if folks were more flexible, especially some of those individuals who have families, like she mentioned, or individuals who have work obligations that take them out of, out of the state or certainly out of town that make it difficult to attend all of the meetings. And so I guess my question really for Attorney Moore is, can we expand on these requirements to not make them so restrictive? Or is this pretty much what is allowed under the state's open meeting laws, so we're stuck to it?
Attorney Moore, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you, Counselor. Sure. It would depend on which expansions we're talking about. I think President Letterman addressed or sort of alluded to this earlier. Some of the policy in place is required by the regulations promulgated by the Attorney General's office. So some of it's sort of immovable. So one of those is physical quorum at the location. That's something that cannot be adjusted. Like, that's required. The reasons for like approval of remote participation is something that's sort of, up to the body's discretion. I think the list that is in the proposal is sort of encompassing of what we've seen from other governments that do this. So, but that is an example of something that certainly is up for kind of discussion amongst the body as to what they think is appropriate. Or as far as expansion goes, like that, that could cover something like that, right?
Understood. And so I think that's more so what I'm thinking about, that we might be able to get a bit more creative to allow folks to continue to participate remotely, under a variety of different circumstances that might not be highlighted in A through E of the requirements. And so I'm not sure if there can be a catch-all added or amended to this. That might be nice. I guess one of my other questions is that, so we've chosen to return for the August meeting, and I'm assuming that is nowhere in the policy. That is just something that you would like to see done, Mr. President. Is that correct?
Well, let me start by saying, Councilor Hurst, that certainly since I was elected to the City Council, one of my top priorities has been increasing accessibility and transparency in local government. And, I appreciate the partnership that you and I have shared over the years, certainly with the town hall meetings that I've had the pleasure of organizing with members here today, as well as the virtual town halls that we've been able to do, during the pandemic and really shift that. So I think that the key is a balance between public accountability and our really obligation to conduct the work of government in public, right, which is sort of spelled out in the open meeting law. And so relative to, amendments to the policy, the policy's goal is to make sure that we can, get back in a reasonable way. But to the extent that you have additional changes that you'd like to propose, I'm certainly open to hearing those tonight, and am hopeful that we'll arrive at a conclusion this evening. In terms of the August meeting, I had set the August meeting because it was our next hearings meeting, and it was sort of the beginning of our next session. So I felt that it was an appropriate opportunity for us to return to the chamber. Of course, the event tonight was necessitated relative to the legislature's failure to expand that law in a timely manner. And as we discussed, I think that I wanted to make sure that we conducted the business that is before us this evening. So that is my hope, is to get back in August, also because I'd really like to avoid the increased cost and time for local businesses, and the fact that other public bodies in the city have come back. The last thing I'd say, and I know I'm answering both your questions kind of at once, Councilor, so I can go back if you need me to, but relative to a catch-all, my concern with that, Councilor Hurst, and I think you could probably appreciate this as a former president as well, is that the open meeting law will ultimately require that a quorum be present. And so if we have a situation where there is just blanket approval for remote participation of members, that will make it very difficult for us to facilitate that quorum. And so while I'm certainly open to hearing from members relative to any additional categories we could create that would make sense, I would also want to caution against it being too broad, and instead look at allowing the chair some discretion in various circumstances. As chair, my commitment is to our members that as long as we're complying with open meeting law and councilors are, submitting requests that are reasonable under the policy, then certainly my inclination would be to approve any and all requests received, because ultimately, as I said, we are all adult professionals and elected public servants who I truly believe have the best interests of the city at heart.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But I think to that end, I think the catch-all, if we added a catch-all, we also would be assuming good intent from counselors, and that, they would still be making an obligation, considering that you have stated clearly that that is what you'd like to see as folks to be present. I just think that catch-all would serve to, highlight something unforeseen that might, that might come up that requires folks to be absent, that is not highlighted in this policy. Just a thought. And then the other thing about the whole starting in August is what occurred today. And so that is one of the fears that I have, and what I'd like to see in some sort of permanent fashion, and maybe under the requirements, is that, we allow for that hybrid option during the summertime every year. I feel like as long as I've been on the council, we've been struggling to get enough numbers to, actually have these August meetings. We're either just barely there, or we maybe fall short. Most of the time, we're just barely there. And so it'd be nice if we could have a way in which we can extend it to having a hybrid option, especially in the summertime, which is why my recommendation probably would have been to start in September, so we don't necessarily get in the way of those individuals who have already planned to be hybrid, considering that the likelihood was high that the governor's order was going to be extended. My last point, and then I'll turn it back over to the president, is that I think Councilor Davila actually touched on a point that is extremely significant. It seems to me that if we're assuming good intent, that we shouldn't need approval from the president, and that, folks would assume that when folks say that they're out for a particular reason, then that's what it would be. And, and folks would not necessarily abuse that, those not being present, to the extent that it would require you to say yay or nay. So just a thought. I certainly understand that we don't want to have 8 counselors away and then we can't have a meeting, but I just highly see that as extremely unlikely unless we're talking about the summertime.
Hey, Mr. President.
Oh, please.
So relative, Councilor, to your concern on the August meeting, I think it is critical that we be publishing the meeting, or at least noticing the meeting in person for August, because I really cannot stand by and see this increased cost continue to be passed on in this increased timeline. I think that's been a concern of mine since we went virtual. But relative to your concern on quorum, the concern is shared, and I would argue that even under this policy, as it currently exists, that anybody who was not able to be present because of an assumption that the meeting would have been virtual or the extension of the open meeting law would qualify under the significant geographic distance due to unforeseen circumstances. And so given that the virtual orders that currently exist allow for that portion of the requirement that says 7 individuals must be present to be waived, I would suspect that we will be all set with a quorum, once we get to that August meeting. Relative to your suggestion on the president having to approve, so that was not something that I put in there, and I think as a former president, you can certainly appreciate. I would love to not be in that position. So if Attorney Moore can speak to, whether or not specifically presidential or chair approval is necessary, I welcome that. With that said, somebody will have to monitor this, right, relative to our quorum ability. And once again, if we schedule public meetings, and I'm thinking beyond the virtual extension, right, if we're scheduling public meetings under the open meeting law a year from now, I think that we need to make sure we have a quorum present, right? So I guess if there's no approval process and sort of a catch-all policy, then we're going to find ourselves in a tough situation, possibly under the virtual piece, if you had a situation where 7 people all filed to participate virtually under one of those categories. Does that make sense? But I'd love to hear from Attorney Moore relative to the approval piece.
Is there an objection? No, I know Councilor Govan has a question or comment. Councilor Hurst, would you prefer to hear from Attorney Moore if it's appropriate or not?
Sure, absolutely.
Attorney Moore, could you add anything to this conversation, please? And I will recognize Councilor Govan in a short time.
Sure, Counselor. Mr. President, thank you. My understanding of the regulations issued by the Attorney General's office is that they have to have someone to approve the remote participation of one of the members. Looking through the Code of Massachusetts regulations right now, just to see how they have it listed. Let's see here.
Because it would seem to me if that's the case, then the clerk could
All
be
right,
the one
so it says procedures for remote participation. Any member of a public body who wishes to participate remotely as soon as reasonably possible prior to a meeting shall notify the chair, or in the chair's absence, the person chairing the meeting, of his or her desire to do so and the reason for and facts supporting his or her request. At the start of the meeting, the chair shall announce the name of any member who will be participating remotely, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, there's a whole listing of the procedure. It's located specifically in Code of Massachusetts Regulations 940 CMR 29.10. So 940 CMR 29.10 will get you to remote participation. When you get to that particular site, you can move forward into, let's see, section procedures for remote participation is subsection 7 of that regulation. Subsection A discusses the participation and approval of the chair. So it's really, this is all from the AG's regulations as is set forth within our policy. We very much mirror what the state requires. There wasn't a whole lot of invention that went into this. This is very much a taking of what the state says we can do and a pasting into our policy. One of the very few exceptions is, again, like the justification for what constitutes like grounds for approval. That is certainly something that's not within the regulations, but procedure would be notifying the chair. That is certainly procedure. So to the best of
the two things that I didn't, what I heard you say was notifying the chair and giving the chair a reason. What I didn't quite hear you say was whether the chair had to approve it. And to me, that is significant for a variety of reasons. And, I can certainly envision an instance, certainly not, Councilor Letterman, but, I could see where folks could weaponize that and do it at a time in which there's a significant issue that is present. And somebody, for whatever reason, is out with COVID, and folks end up saying, asking to be remote, and it's not granted. And so I just would feel more comfortable if I saw that aspect in writing before I move forward. And then it also just seems to me that we might want to have a little bit more discussion in terms of what else we could potentially add to this, or sort of having some sort of catch-all. But I'll defer to the rest of the body.
Mr. President, I do have some thoughts on that, but I'll defer as well to allow for folks to get their questions out.
Councilor Govan.
Thank you very much. As one of the freshman counselors who came into this and have been remote the whole time, I'm excited to be back in the chambers and to be in person, because as a social worker, body language and the nonverbal communication is very important, and you miss a lot of that on Zoom. I understand, the convenience of being on Zoom and not having to come in. I actually wanted to be here in person today. When it was raining, I said, I'm not going in. I'm just going to be on Zoom. But, I made a commitment. I understand Councilor Whitfield's point. We have family things at home. We have work. We have a whole lot of other responsibilities. But I'm really excited to be able to be back in the chambers. And I understand that, through the end of the year at least, before the governor's extension expires, we'll have the opportunity to be, remote still. And I think that it's okay. I really love that Focus Springfield is going to continue offering the hybrid model for our community, because I certainly agree with Councilor Whitfield that I believe the community is able to participate more when we do it this way. So I really love the community input because that's vital. That's the reason that we're here, because of the community elected us to serve their needs. And the only way we can do that is by hearing them and listening to them. So I really want that to happen. And I'm not sure about, you know, when I heard the reasons for being excused, it was like, they're so vague. You could just say anything, you know. That's what I thought about when I first said it, when I first heard them, you know. So really, you could just say, well, I have an emergency today and I'm just going to be on Zoom. And I understand needing to know how many people are going to do that, because if you don't have a quorum, then you got to cancel the meeting in this policy. Now, so what I guess the question is, if we have the option of being totally remote right now, correct? Until the end of the year, right?
In theory, yes.
In theory. However, at the end next year, I don't think that the governor is going to, maybe the new governor will. No, they won't. But they want to extend it, so we're going to have to come in person at some point, right? And I'm really excited for us to be able to do that. I honestly am, you know, because like I said, the nonverbal communication gets missed a lot, and I'd love to be able to see that, because even on Zoom, you know, most of the time, most of the counselors have their cameras off, so you can't see what's going on, you know, and that's just a big thing for me, and maybe that's just because I'm a social worker, and I depend on that a lot, and I believe in communication, so that's just my take on it. I think that we should pass a policy for us to be able to come back in, because we have to start getting used to it. You know, we've been this way you all have been this way for almost 3 years now. And it's very comfortable. I understand that, you know, and it's convenient. But we're going to have to come back at some point. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Council, thank you, Councilor Govan. If I may, Councilor Perez, followed by Councilor Davila.
Thank you. I just want to say that one of the concerns that I really have is putting yourself in an awkward position, and this is the part. And I agree with Councilor Govan. At one point, we have to be here present, and we're going to have to. But having to call and say, I'm not able to attend, I think to that extent, it should be sufficient, and not just to say, you know, the personal issue. I think that's why I feel very uncomfortable, I'm going to be honest, the part, because then I feel like a child in school that I have to go to the principal and say, could I go? That's the part that is the most that I do not agree with. I think, as we said, we are professional, and if I cannot attend the meeting, I just got out of the country. I just came to the meeting today because I saw the necessity that if I would have not been here, you guys wouldn't have. But that also, I don't want that to be on my ways. You know what I'm saying? I have not been feeling well, but I make it a position to be here because it would have been lack of a quorum. And as a stand, if you need 7, I think that right now, we are numbered right now. So that's the only concern that I have. Thank you.
If I could just speak to the concern.
If there is not an objection from Councilor Davila.
No objection.
So it's relative to your concern, Councilor Perez, I totally understand and agree. We're good now because the open meeting law provision was extended by the legislature to allow for this to take place today, which would continue to be in place until December of 2023. So we could have a we could have a hybrid meeting of this nature with better technology once the upgrades occur. So with that said, under the existing policy, what you just described would certainly be sufficient for me as president. I certainly agree that we're all professionals, and so if you call me up and say I must participate remotely due to an emergency, you're certainly not going to be asked on my end for documentation or a description of the emergency, right? That would be me. To our colleague, Councilor Hurst's point, and I certainly except that he was not speaking about me directly, but perhaps an imaginary future president or future circumstance politically. I certainly can appreciate that. And so, I think the circumstance that you described as somebody reached out and said, I have COVID, and you said, well, I don't care, you can't participate, I mean, certainly would be in violation of the policy. But with that said, Tom, have you been able to look into while you're there whether or not we're, as the chair, simply able to accept the notification, as opposed to have to actually rule on it in the open meeting law. And the reason that I would add to that, too, is regardless of where we end up on this piece, I actually think it probably should be the president, even though as the president, I'm not excited about that prospect. The president is elected by the council. And so in the event that there was a situation where the president was acting inappropriately as described, I think there's certainly mechanisms for the council, I would hope, to hold the president accountable, the least of which would be, electing a new president. So I think it's important that we get a clear answer on that, though, Tom. So do we know, can that piece simply be a notification to the chair, or does it have to be approval by the chair?
It's a good question, Mr. President. I think what comes down to subsection 5 of the same regulation that I was talking about before talks about the permissible reasons for remote participation. And this is where we get into our kind of list of what we have put down. And what the regulation says in the law is remote participation can only be allowed if physical attendance would be unreasonably difficult. Now, the Attorney General has not done us the favor of defining what unreasonably difficult means. So that comes down to each individual body having a debate and discussion on what they believe their best procedures are. So what we've looked at throughout the Commonwealth is a procedure where, as is traditionally done within a body, the chair has discretion over allowance of things requested by members. And this is very common, where a chair is asked to allow a speaker to speak or allow certain things to be taken out of order. A chair in the office of being the president or the chair of the body is kind of tasked with deciding certain elements. That being said, if our body decided to enact a policy that did not have the president being the deciding party, I don't see anything within the Attorney General's regulations that says you can't do that. But what I would caution the council is that you have to have someone decide, and it really can't be a policy where everyone's deciding for themselves what constitutes an unreasonably difficult situation. This is a public body that meets as an open government in a physical chamber, and access to the meeting can be done and has been available for many years by various media. So the idea that the public cannot see a public meeting of the council in the chambers is not correct and hasn't been for a very long time. So I'll leave it at that. If the body decides it wants to change the policy to have a different procedure for allowing permission for what is considered unreasonably difficult under the regulation, that's certainly allowable. But I think the quickest and easiest and most efficient way is to have the director of the body, the chair, making that decision.
Thank you, Attorney Moore.
Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a few questions, but if I may, without objection, Mr. President, I'd like to address the question to Focus Springfield, if they know the answer.
Sure, certainly.
It's Brandon? Yes. Just a quick question. You may or may not know I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. You may or may not know, but we talked about outfitting the council chambers, which sounds very fantastic. I'm very excited about that. But you talked about timeline by April 1st, if I remember correctly. By beginning of the year, January 1st, I think you might have implied.
It would be set up before then in some capacity.
Right.
What we would be doing is disassembling some equipment that's currently in use at our studio, bringing it over here to be temporarily housed, and that would be used. And then as new gear is able to be sourced, it would replace that stuff, and then that stuff would go back to 1200 Main.
Gotcha. Now, would you happen to know the funding source for this?
Part of it is our own private investment, and part of it.
You mean private Focus Springfield thing?
Focus Springfield, not Brendan Holland.
And
he's a millionaire.
And part of it, I believe, is through ARPA funding. But
are you guys putting a request already?
I truly cannot say. I'm in charge of plugging the stuff in, and Steve is in charge of paying for it.
You're in charge, Brandon. Okay. Yeah. All right, thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, you bet. I should, just while I'm up here, note also, because I think it is relevant, part of the complication of a large room like the council chambers is when you all in the chambers are hosting a hybrid meeting, we will need to be a part of it.
Correct.
In order to make the handshake happen between
Right.
a large room with 15 microphones
Right.
and Zoom both directions.
Right.
We will also be making a significant investment in the subcommittee chambers, and that room will be able to do hybrid meetings without us there. So, I just wanted to sort of make those two spaces, clear as well.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, you
Thank
bet.
you. Mr. President, the reason I ask is because I'm starting to see, and I'm gonna get to the part that I had the most difficulty with. In a
Okay,
second, but-
may I, not to interrupt, but
Yes.
just to make the body aware, we have 15 minutes before, I believe there's a rule regarding the time of the operation of the council takes effect. So please be conscious of that. You will have the option to continue and beyond there, but I believe that requires a vote. So, just be conscious of the breadth of, or length of breadth of
Right.
your question and comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess time flies when you're having fun.
I wouldn't call this fun.
So, Mr. President, and so I'm starting to look at this as a way of how can we allow for more participation of the public, which is paramount. And I think that this pandemic has indeed proved that it is possible for government to continue to function, and most importantly, to allow for more participation. With that being said, I just think, before I forget, that whatever we do decide to do as a body, that the department heads and the public employees with business should still be present in front of us in the council chamber, not remotely. Today, I could see why this is happening, but I think that when you continue forward, Mr. President, that we should have that in mind, that we have expectation that the department heads and the pertinent city employees should be present in front of us. With that being said, I think that just two more quick points. One, I do think that we should have a time limit on this, okay? I'm thinking, and this is not set in stone, December 31st, 2022, and then we can reassess from there. We should have a time limit on this. And the issue that I'm having a lot of hard time with is exactly what Councilor Govan just said. I'm really having a difficult time with Section 5, particularly Section 8. I could see Councilor Letterman's point. I wouldn't want to create that more work for myself. I do think that Councilor Hurst has a good point that perhaps it could be the clerk who handles that. I don't know. But, you know, if we are or professionals and mature, I guess, why do we need to ask for permission, I guess? But if the state law says that we need to ask for permission, then I think that to avoid any particular appearance of whatever, that should be the clerk who handles that. With that being said, I don't think we're gonna solve this in 15 minutes. I think we should send this to committee, because I think August 27th was the target date for this to happen. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Our hearings meeting is going to be scheduled for August 22nd.
22nd, okay. Today, what's today's date? 18th. So I don't want to make a motion yet. I don't want to, but that's what I'm inclining right now. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Can we move the question?
Yes.
Rule the body.
There's been you making that in the form?
Counselor
I am,
Whitfield.
Hold on. My hand was
Without
up before a couple and I let it pass. I want to go.
Councilor Whitfield, please.
Go ahead, then I'll move the question.
All right. So first, I just wanted to say I find the permission part, like everybody else, really intrusive. We're all adults. I'm not going to call and get permission from anybody. I don't know what that constitutes a write-up or what it does, but whatever has to be done at that point has to be done. If I have an emergency, I'm not going to get permission. I'm going to take my emergency. I'm going to come virtual or not at all. Number two, I wanted to know a little bit about committee meetings, because I host a lot of them. And it seems like if I have to be there every single time, no matter what, it's going to be a deterrence for me to continue to have the meetings that are imperative that we have each week. So almost every regular meeting, there's a finance subcommittee meeting to go over the orders. Then there's ARPA funding. Then there's other financial orders that come along that we may need to have other finance meetings. So I'm only talking about the finance committee right now because that's the majority of the meetings that I have. But I find that if we have to be there and there has to be a quorum, it may be a deterrent to having meetings that are important to have. Because if I have to go to City Hall 4 or 5 times in a week or a 2-week time frame, I'm gonna be like, hold up, let me maybe expand that time a little bit more. So can you explain how subcommittee meetings?
Certainly, Councilor Whitfield. So, as I mentioned earlier, I see a great deal of value in virtual participation in subcommittee meetings. And as a matter of fact, I think the place where the public has the most opportunity to engage is public speak out and subcommittee meetings, right? Unless they're specifically on the agenda for a regular meeting or a hearings meeting outside of public speak out, there's not a lot of opportunity for the public to engage. And so in that regard, as long as the virtual meeting allowance is in effect, which right now is through December 2023, as I mentioned in my earlier testimony, I would expect that we would continue to be able to have fully virtual committee meetings. In the event that a chair of a committee wanted to call an in-person meeting, they theoretically could. The point that you made relative to the individual having to be here and then having virtual participation, now that would go into effect if the open meeting law, if and when the open meeting law returns to its original state in December of 2023. That is beyond our control, and so that would require 2 members of the committee to be present in the room. I think there's a conversation worth having with our legislative delegation about perhaps seeing some changes to that. I think you're already hearing some debate in the legislature about that, but that piece is beyond us for the time being, though it would be permissible. And once again, relative to having to seek approval through the chair, again, if it is not required for approval to be sought through the chair, I am perfectly fine with it being a notification. If Tom can give us a clear answer on whether or not the Attorney General guidance states approval must be granted, if it can be a notification, I'm not against that. And if it cannot be a notification, once again, in full agreement as professional adults with the best interest of the city at heart, if I'm informed that an individual must participate remotely under the remote participation policy, my intention would be to grant that remote participation.
Okay, so I think Attorney Moore left, so he won't be able to answer that. And I would also like that answer. So I'm going to make a motion to committee before we move this question, because I don't think that without clarification that we should just move the question. So I'm going to motion that it goes to committee so we can have more conversation about the procedure before we just move it. There were some suggestions on amendments that were brought up that we didn't get through. And so I will vote no in a move the question because all of my my questions aren't answered at this point. So I'm going to make a motion to committee and hopefully it passed.
Second.
Motion's been made to send to committee with a second by Councilor Hurst. On the motion.
On the motion, Mr. President.
Councilor.
I certainly appreciate that folks have more questions and want to make sure that we have the most robust policy possible. I certainly share that goal. We will need to have a special meeting prior to August 22nd because we have unfinished business here anyways. And so certainly we'll have another opportunity prior to August 22nd to institute a policy. So if folks, if the will of folks is to have another committee meeting, certainly we can. I would ask that folks reach out to me with their suggestions, and we'll certainly make sure that Attorney Moore is able to answer some of the questions that have come up this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
To that point, there's been a motion and seconded. I'm sorry, Councilor Davila?
Thank you, Mr. President.
On the motion?
Yes, just a question, what committee are we going to send this to?
General Government.
General Government.
It's going to go to General Government?
Yes.
And who's the chair on that?
Councilor Fitton.
Councilor Fitton, okay. He's not here, but I do request that, to be set up at a time which most of us can attend at the, I think will be the most beneficial, but I will reach out to Councilor Fenton with that request myself. Yeah, so that's my question. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Madam Clerk,
Counselor on the motion to committee, Counselor Perez.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Curran.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Brown. Absent, Counselor Walsh. Absent, Counselor Davila on the motion to committee.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen. Absent, Counselor Edwards.
yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton. Absent, Counselor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Devon.
No.
No. Counselor Letterman.
Yes.
The motion is sufficient.
7 yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Members, at this time, it is
5 minutes.
5 minutes to 10. We have one resolution before us, and then we have a number of items to continue. If members are willing, I think we can do this fairly quickly, but certainly that would require at 10 o'clock a motion. And so since we are 5 minutes from 10, I'm going to ask now if there is a motion to take up those final categories.
Question, Mr. President.
Councilor Davila.
Thank you, sir. I might have missed it, but item 17, did we dispose of that?
Item 17 is related to item 18, which requires a 2/3 majority
That's
vote.
what you have.
So we're going to get to that in one moment.
Okay, thank you.
If I could ask a question, Mr. President.
Councilor Curran.
We're doing what with the other items that are not?
So the, Councilor Curran, in response to your question, the items that require 2/3 majority vote, we currently have 8 councilors present. And so that is item 15, item 13, item 18, and item 17 is related to item 18. So my intention is to continue those items and call a special meeting to take them up.
Understood.
And then we have one resolution, that is item 27. If we have time for it, we can take it. If we do not, we can't.
There was, Mr. President.
Councilor Edwards.
One question related to the Violent Crime Initiative grant. I believe it may be time sensitive. Is that on our agenda?
We already did.
We concluded all grants that are on our agenda currently.
Mr. President, point of information.
Councilor Davila.
I wonder, Mr. President, if it would be appropriate, being 9:68 according to my watch, if we make a motion to extend it 15 minutes.
Motion has been made by Councilor Davila
I'll
to
second that
extend. The
motion.
motion's been seconded by Councilor Edwards. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the question to extend, the motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes to 10:15. To 10:15? Madam Clerk, please call the roll. I'm sorry, Councilor.
No, I'm perfectly fine to make that motion. I don't wanna, if that's the will of the body,
Oh, I apologize. I thought you made the motion.
I do believe you mentioned you wanna take the item, the resolution, but if you guys wanna put it later, I'm okay with that. I'm just trying to.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion to extend it 15 minutes.
Councilor Davila has made a motion to extend the meeting 15 minutes to 10:15. Councilor Kern has seconded that motion. Is there any discussion?
No.
Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to extend the meeting to 10:15
The
p.m.
motion to extend the meeting to 10:15. Yes. Yes. Counselor Perez.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Curran.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Brown. Absent. Counselor Walsh. Absent. Counselor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen. Absent. Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton. Absent. Counselor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Gavone.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Letterman.
Yes, votes are sufficient. Meeting is extended to 10:15. Madam Clerk, please call item 27.
Item number 27, opposition to unnecessary gas pipeline construction.
Councilor Govan.
Yes, I want to make first of all, an amendment to the, resolution, instead of it saying, in Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, we wanted to say Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. And it's in the, the sixth whereas.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. There's a motion to
Second that
strike
motion.
the language, Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act and substitute it for Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, seconded by Councilor Edwards. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the amendment.
Councilor Perez,
The amendment?
on the amendment.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Curran,
Absent.
absent. Councilor Curran, Councilor Brown, absent. Councilor Walsh, absent. Councilor Davila.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Earth,
Yes.
yes. Councilor Allen, absent. Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
yes. Councilor Fenton, absent. Councilor Whitfield,
Yes.
yes. Councilor Gavon,
Yes.
Councilor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The amendment is made. Councilor Govan?
So I wanted to, present this resolution, because we oppose the toxic, gas pipeline that Eversource is proposing to, extend through, actually East Long Meadow towards almost downtown Springfield into, Ward 1. And it is, just in case something happens. And we think that it is not necessary. They call it themselves redundant. So I propose that we, pass this resolution at the city council level so that we can, make them known that we don't need this in our city. They said they're gonna be sustainable energy by 2030. They have 8 years to do that. And this is not the way to do it, by building another pipeline.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. Are any other members looking to comment or debate on the issue?
Mr. President,
Councilor Perez.
one of the concerns that I have with this pipeline that was part of the meeting that we had 3 weeks ago, we had a walk at the riverfront. And one of the biggest concerns that I'm aware that the community is a big issue is, while were waiting for the part of the meeting from Long Meadow that came, the other people that came to Long Meadow, the smell while standing there of gas was awful. That's number one. Number two, it was saying it was only a pipeline. No, according to the meeting that we had that day, they not only having the pipeline, but they adding another, and I don't know what's the specific word, but they're gonna do an amendment to the existing box that they have there. I call it the box from hell. I'm gonna be transparent. They adding that up, and that was no information ever given to us. I think at this point, the presenting of this resolution is very efficient, but I think that and I'm bringing this in this right now, this particular time. We have to ask more questions when it comes to all these pipes that are being around the city. Not only is cost effective to the city, because we have so many potholes in the city that is crazy. But on the resolution, I am forward with the resolution, but there's some other concerns. I don't know what committee should be going to, but there should be some concerns brought up to the specific. I don't know if we have an environmental committee. That is my committee, and I know that as a chair, but we need to start discussing before we pass all these pipes that are being in the city. And the community has a great concern for this. And thank you for having me speak on this, because I am very concerned. I know that they saying it's the pressure of the gas, and all of a sudden this is happening within less than a year. All this development is happening in the city, and I think we don't have the expertise, but we could find someone that could assist us through the environmental committee to answer all these questions. And I think we have to take seriously, like my colleague Govan said is 8 years. Why are we not emphasizing on that and enforcing that if this plan should be stopped with the pipeline until we see what they have for the sustainable in 8 years? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Perez. Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm wholeheartedly in support of this resolution. Just a quick question. As I know many of my other colleagues have co-sponsored this as long as myself, is that might it make sense for us to wait to vote on this resolution until we have more members of the council present? It just I'll defer to the body, but it just seems to me that it would be much more powerful and much stronger of a message if we had more members of the council voting in support of this resolution than just the 7 that we have here now. I mean, especially when the body is comprised of 13 members, it just, for me, it doesn't look as strong. And unless there's a rush to get this resolution put forward, I think it's something folks might want to consider. So I'll just put that on the table.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. I don't disagree, although as in my position as chair, I could not say that, so I appreciate you saying it. Councilor Edwards.
To Councilor Hurst's point, but one thing before I make a motion, I intend to make a motion that we table this until a more appropriate time in reference to having a more collective group of councilors. But at some point, somebody should be prepared to answer the question of what was actually stated by Eversource's representative. Because several times I've heard councilors mention they have 8 years they're not in 8 years, is to get to carbon neutral. That does not mean they're getting rid of gas or switching over to alternatives. And so at some point, when we come back after this meeting and we have a full body of the council present and we actually taking up this resolution, somebody should be here and prepared to answer the question and what the definition of carbon neutral actually is.
Thank you, Councilor.
So with that being said, I'd like to put forth a motion that we table this resolution until another more appropriately attended meeting.
Second.
Motion has been made to continue. Is it to continue, Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Motion has been made to continue by Councilor Edwards. It was seconded by Councilor Hurst. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councilor Govan.
I just want to say that the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition, who was here actually at the public speak out, did speak out about the toxic pipeline that's coming through the city. And there is a sense of urgency, I think, and I agree with more councilors being in agreement with this. I believe that to them there is a sense of urgency because Eversource is continuing to propagate that they need this redundant pipeline. He just said early in the meeting, I think in the Finance Committee meeting, that by 2030 they're supposed to be creating more sustainable energy, right? So I agree that we need to be on them and asking them. I really love what my colleague, Councilor Perez, said about where's the plan? What plan are you following to be sustainable by 2030, right? Because the state is on that goal as well. So we have to find out, what they're doing and why they're not using, I don't know how many millions of dollars that they're supposed to be using for this toxic pipeline to convert people to electricity maybe, and then having solar panels, So I want to be able to push Eversource somehow to give us those answers and to make a decision to start working towards that, right? Because they only have 8 years if it's 2030, So we have to figure out a way to make them do that. So thank you. Thank you for letting me.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. Again, we have a motion on the table to continue, and I will be calling a special meeting to take up anything remaining from tonight very, very soon. So is there any other discussion on this topic? Seeing none, without objection, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to continue the resolution to our next meeting.
Yes. Councilor Perez?
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Curran, absent Counselor Brown, absent Counselor Walsh, absent Counselor Davila.
Oh, yes.
Yes, Counselor Earth.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen, absent Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton, absent Counselor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Gavon.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The item is continued. Madam Clerk, items 13, 15, 17, and 18 require a two-thirds majority vote. We do not have a two-thirds majority of the council present. I'll need to entertain a motion to continue items 13, 15, 17, and 18.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Counselor Davila. It was seconded by Counselor Edwards. Is there any discussion on the motion to continue? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to continue items 13, 15, 17, and 18.
Yes, Counselor Perez.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Curran, absent Counselor Brown, absent Counselor Walsh, Counselor Davila.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen, absent Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton, absent Counselor Whitfield.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Gavon. Yes. Yes, Counselor Letterman.
Yes, the votes are sufficient. The items are continued. Madam Clerk, before we adjourn, I know Captain Keenan is still on, and I believe there might be some confusion about a grant he was looking for. Captain Keenan, which item were you looking for?
Oh, probably none.
I believe it was 15, that violent crime initiative grant.
Item 15, Captain Keenan, was a transfer of stabilization reserve to the police department for professional services, I believe related to the consent decree. That item is continued.
Oh, that's not it. Yeah, that's not it. Hold on, let me. No, that's not it. They told me that that VCI grant was on for tonight too, that along with the SSYI.
I'm sorry, Captain Keenan. I think there might have been some miscommunication because all the grants have been approved. But if you want to reach out to me, we'll figure out what it was, and we are going to have a special meeting in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Keenan.
Quick point of information.
I'll take Councilor Davila's point of information before we adjourn.
So the next meeting is going to be the same format?
That will be determined. At this time, Madam Clerk, is there any further business before the City Council?
There are no other business for the council tonight.
Then we will stand adjourned until our next meeting.
Y'all can go to bed and we gotta drive home.